This story introduces the blonde Duchess Eleanor as she begins her rebellion against her oppressive marriage. Inside the study, the black-haired Duke Ernst reacts with total shock to Eleanor's sudden demand. Ernst stares intensely at the blonde Duchess, demanding she repeat her unbelievable statement immediately. A soft shriek sounds as Eleanor places a formal document firmly onto the Duke's mahogany desk. Eleanor looks him directly in the eye, stating firmly that she wants a divorce. The blonde Duchess expresses her hope for an amicable separation that avoids hurting either party's feelings. Ernst's purple eyes narrow as he processes the weight of Eleanor's unexpected and bold request. A sudden, sharp rip sounds as the black-haired Duke destroys the legal papers before her. A soft clench sounds as Ernst explains that their union is an imperial mandate arranged by the Emperor. He warns Eleanor that dissolving a state-sanctioned marriage is not as simple as flipping a coin. Eleanor remains stoic, thinking to herself that she fully expected this dismissive reaction from him. Ernst turns away, coldly reminding her that they must adhere to the Emperor's original orders. While Eleanor maintains a faint, knowing smile, the Duke remains troubled by her sudden shift in demeanor. The narrative shifts to 3 years prior, showing the grand and sun-drenched Mechlin family estate. Inside the manor, the head butler frantically orders the staff to prepare for the arrival of the mistress. A loud, booming shout echoes through the halls as the final preparations are made for the ladies' entrance. The household servants line the hallway in perfect, fearful formation, awaiting their superior's arrival. One terrified maid remembers being beaten for minor flaws and prays she survives today's inspection. A series of sharp rhythmic clicks sound as a woman in red shoes walks down the stairs. Carolyn, the Duke's mother, enters the room with a cold and imposing presence that silences the staff. The staff offers a synchronized greeting, which Carolyn acknowledges with a chillingly pleasant comment about the morning. Carolyn's sharp, judgmental gaze sweeps across the room, searching for the slightest imperfection among the servants. She calls out a maid named Becky, who responds with a visible tremor of terror in her voice. A soft eek sounds as Carolyn points out an incorrectly tied knot on the young woman's uniform. The mother-in-law continues her ruthless inspection, criticizing every detail and ordering several servants to follow her for punishment. Carolyn pauses and sniffs the air, questioning a strange and offensive smell that has caught her attention. A faint, cruel smile plays across the older woman's lips as she identifies the source of the scent. Carolyn points an accusatory finger toward Eleanor, declaring that the offensive smell is coming from her. The young blonde Duchess stands paralyzed by the public humiliation as the entire staff watches in silence. Whispers ripple through the hall as the servants question if the young mistress truly smells so foul. A series of heavy, measured clicks sound as Carolyn approaches Eleanor to continue her verbal assault. The brown-haired mother-in-law asks Eleanor if she has no conscience, while the Duchess reacts with shock. Carolyn leans in close, whispering cruelly that Eleanor smells terrible and questions if she ever washes herself. She orders Eleanor to step away immediately, prompting a tearful and frantic apology from the humiliated girl. Carolyn's internal monologue reveals her deep disdain for the girl who married her son Ernst against her wishes. The marriage was a political move to unify two empires, a decision that ruined Carolyn's own social plans. Eleanor looks down in sorrow as she recalls Carolyn stating that she likes nothing about her. Carolyn demands an update on an embroidery project, and Eleanor admits she hasn't finished it yet. She scolds the blonde Duchess for being slow, noting that the item is for Duke Mechlin. Carolyn emphasizes the spiritual importance of the talisman, while Eleanor submissively promises to keep working. The older woman dismisses her with a contemptuous tisk, showing her utter lack of respect for Eleanor. A soft crinkle sounds as Eleanor clenches her fan, telling herself she must endure the constant abuse. A sharp, tight clench sounds as the blonde Duchess bites her lip to keep from crying out. Eleanor is fueled by a desperate determination to never repeat the tragic failures of her previous life. Duke Ernst is introduced as the empire's protector, belonging to the most prestigious family in the land. Their political union was formed despite Ernst's cold nature, though his loyalty to the crown was absolute. Because Ernst was always busy with state affairs, Carolyn was left in complete control of Eleanor's life. Carolyn frequently used insulting language, screaming at the blonde Duchess for daring to speak up for herself. The older woman acted as a literal puppeteer, monitoring and controlling every move Eleanor made within the manor. Labeled a parrot by noblewomen, Eleanor suffered in silence for 3 years, hoping for a better future. A skeletal figure of death looms as the story begins with the announcement of Carolyn's death. A maid named Becky points an accusing finger, falsely naming the blonde woman as a murderer. Bound and defenseless, the blonde woman is led to her execution after being denied a trial. As the guillotine falls, she desperately wishes for another chance to change her terrible fate. Bathed in a magical glow, the blonde woman awakens in the past, vowing to live wisely. Carolyn stares with icy resolve, determined to never repeat the misery of her previous life again. An older woman in a red gown demands to know why the blonde woman is silent. The woman continues her insults, questioning the intelligence and bloodline of the blonde woman's family. Bowing her head, Carolyn offers a soft apology and promises to be more careful hereafter. The older woman looks on with boredom, internally mocking the blonde woman's lack of pride. She turns away, asking if breakfast is ready, while a maid confirms it is indeed prepared. A maid announces that steak has been prepared for breakfast while the blonde woman stands by. Staring at a sword, the blonde woman resolves to secure a divorce before death finds her. The older woman sips tea with an air of cold elegance, surrounded by piles of paperwork. The blonde woman tentatively peers into the room as the seated woman watches her with indifference. Standing before a large desk, Carolyn asks if she was summoned, receiving a curt affirmative reply. The older woman indicates a massive stack of lists, ordering her to memorize them quickly. She leans back, warning the blonde woman that failure to memorize will result in severe punishment. Carolyn bows her head slightly, submissively accepting the harsh instructions and the daunting task ahead. Adjusting her hat, the older woman scoffs at Carolyn's newfound ability to speak politely. They stand back to back as the woman issues a final challenge regarding the blonde woman's success. A sudden, sharp thud sounds as the door slams shut, leaving the blonde woman alone. Finally alone, Carolyn exhales a long, relieved sigh while looking over the messy, paper-covered desk. A soft rustle sounds as the blonde woman ties back her hair and prepares for study. She begins sifting through the noble portraits, her hands moving quickly across the scattered documents. A small, confident smile appears on her face as she realizes her situation is quite fortunate. Laughing softly, she reveals that these are the exact noble lists she memorized in the past. Looking at a document, she accurately predicts that foreign books will be her next difficult task. She continues flipping through the pages, anticipating the eventual requirement to record the entire family history. Stretching her arms wide, the blonde woman celebrates that her previous memories are now great assets. A dark, heavy voice interrupts her moment of peace, asking what she is doing there. Gasping in shock, Carolyn's eyes widen as she realizes she is no longer alone. Duke Mecklin stands tall in a formal military uniform, staring down with a cold, stern expression. Startled by his sudden appearance, the blonde woman wonders exactly when the man entered the library. The black-haired man leans in closer, repeating his demand for an explanation of her activities. Duke Mecklin questions her presence in the room, prompting a shocked reaction from the blonde woman. He leans aggressively over the desk, asserting that he was the one who asked a question first. A quick, nervous gulp sounds as Carolyn feels the intense pressure of his intimidating presence. Carolyn explains that she is following his mother's orders to organize and memorize the noble lists. The Duke looks down with suspicion, doubting that a foreigner could organize these lists so well. He dismisses her effort, ordering her to stop wasting energy and return to her room immediately. Looking up with narrowed eyes, the blonde woman refuses to back down from his harsh dismissal. Challenging him directly, she asks the black-haired man why he considers her hard work useless. She firmly declares that as a member of the Mecklin family, she wants to be helpful. Duke Mecklin scoffs, asking why he should ever trust such a test to someone like her. The blonde woman's eyes go wide in shock as his cruel words land with painful impact. A sharp gasp escapes her as she reels from his blatant refusal to acknowledge her efforts. She thinks sadly of how she only hoped for basic courtesy in their loveless marriage arrangement. The man informs her that he has news, prompting her to ask if it is important. To her utter shock, he reveals his intention to send her away to the distant northern branch. The blonde woman Carolyn desperately pleads to be placed anywhere, promising to never burden the Duke. Duke Mecklin remains silent as Carolyn offers to serve in any capacity he finds convenient. Clutching her hands, Carolyn reiterates her desire to be useful to the family regardless of her role. Realizing she needs his permission to leave, she is stunned when he coldly calls her audacious. Leaning in with a menacing glare, the black-haired man notes he once thought she was merely quiet. A startled gasp escapes Carolyn as the Duke continues his aggressive verbal assault in the library. He leans dangerously close, declaring that he utterly despises people who do not know their place. A harsh reality sets in as his voice emphasizes that her royal status vanished upon her marriage. He commands her to remain silent and fulfill traditional duties, effectively reducing her to a household ornament. Dark memories of past mockery resurface where nobles laughed at her for being an untrainable bird. Trembling with suppressed emotion, Carolyn clenches her dress as the painful weight of the past haunts her. Duke Mecklin turns away with indifference, his cold demeanor signaling the end of their tense confrontation. Bowing out, Carolyn announces her departure while the Duke stands motionless behind his massive wooden desk. A soft click sounds as she reaches for the door handle, eager to escape his oppressive presence. She steals one final, wary glance back at the man who holds her fate in his hands. Standing tall in his military uniform, the black-haired Duke watches her leave with an unreadable expression. Carolyn reflects on the irony of their loveless arrangement where she maintained a hollow, formal respect. Stepping into the hallway, she closes the door behind her with a definitive, quiet thud. A heavy silence follows as Carolyn stands alone, her back to the library she just escaped. Looking down with a heavy heart, she wonders if she will ever escape this house alive. As a new chapter begins, the scene shifts to a person walking through a grassy area. Driving through the grand gates, the carriage driver urges the horses onward with a loud shout. The Mecklin family crest glimmers on the carriage door as they travel through the city streets. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere is stifling as Carolyn sits across from her stern mother-in-law. Carolyn instinctively looks out the window, mesmerized by the passing scenery of the unfamiliar city streets. The older woman snaps at her, ordering her to stop looking outside while Carolyn reacts in shock. She further demands that Carolyn avoid looking at her, prompting a submissive and quiet verbal agreement. Watching Carolyn with disdain, the mother-in-law thinks of her urgent need to reassert control over her. She recalls with frustration how Carolyn unexpectedly mastered complex paperwork and social dances with supernatural speed. Gritting her teeth, the woman admits she never anticipated Carolyn possessing such formidable intellectual skills. Upon arrival, the older woman demands to know why Carolyn is hesitating to exit the carriage. The carriage rests in a sunny district as the two women prepare to enter a building. Walking down the street, Carolyn realizes she is in a tailored district she has never visited. A light tapping sounds as the mother-in-law walks ahead, plotting to find a new weakness. A sharp bump sounds as Carolyn accidentally collides with a mysterious silver-haired man wearing a mask. The masked man immediately offers a polite apology, catching Carolyn off guard with his unexpected courtesy. He stands tall, his elegant vest and intricate mask lending him an air of mystery. Carolyn stares back in bewilderment, trying to make sense of the strange encounter in the street. A close-up reveals his striking green eye behind the mask, observing her with a sharp gaze. The mother-in-law calls out to Carolyn, demanding an explanation for her sudden delay on the walkway. Startled, Carolyn quickly excuses herself from the masked man and hurries back toward the older woman. The older woman cross-examines her about the delay, prompting Carolyn to offer a quick apology. As she walks away, Carolyn wonders about the identity of the masked stranger she just encountered. She recalls memorizing noble portraits, yet she finds no record of a man with such a mask. From the background, the silver-haired man watches Carolyn's departure with a lingering and focused intensity. Carolyn systematically rules out several noble houses, finding no logical candidate for the mysterious masked individual. A man with a mustache and a green jacket joyfully welcomes the two women to his establishment. A heavy creak sounds as he swings the doors wide, inviting them into an opulent salon. Settling onto a velvet sofa, the mother-in-law prepares for a consultation while the staff waits. The tailor gestures grandly as he begins his service, maintaining a bright and professional demeanor. The lavender-haired maid presents a decorative porcelain cup, announcing that she has also brought some tea. Gesturing with an open hand, the lavender-haired maid invites Carolyn to follow her further into the boutique. The older woman dismisses the maid's attention, ordering her not to worry about Carolyn's needs or presence. Coldly addressing the blonde woman, the mother-in-law commands her to simply stand there and remain completely silent. Watching the interaction, the maid wonders why a noble lady like Carolyn is being so blatantly ignored. A flamboyant man with a mustache and a green jacket strikes a theatrical pose as he welcomes them. The tailor probably explains that his new outfit designs incorporate a unique personal touch into the latest trends. Describing the garments, he notes the fuller sleeves and the sophisticated combination of light brown and gold colors. The mother-in-law decides to try the left dress first, receiving a prompt and submissive affirmative from the tailor. When the maid offers to lead her to the dressing room, the older woman dismisses her assistance entirely. Looking back with a sharp glare, the mother-in-law informs Carolyn that she will be acting as a servant today. She mockingly questions if Carolyn dislikes the idea, suggesting that service is her only possible contribution to the family. Cruelly comparing her past life to that of a pig, she demands Carolyn finally start acting like a human. Carolyn clenches her dress as she struggles to maintain composure while the woman continues her aggressive verbal berating. Looking up with a freezing gaze, Carolyn realizes that her mother-in-law is the true source of their problems. The older woman blames Carolyn's mother for her lack of proper upbringing, ignoring Carolyn's desperate plea for her to stop. A sudden sharp rustle sounds as the blonde woman takes a decisive step forward, her patience finally reaching its end. Carolyn stares down at her seated mother-in-law, flatly declaring that the woman's behavior is utterly pathetic. The tailor and maid watch in stunned silence as the mother-in-law reacts with pure, open-mouthed shock at the defiance. Rattled by the confrontation, the older woman questions the newfound arrogance visible in the blonde woman's cold blue eyes. Carolyn questions if such petty and childish behavior is truly appropriate for a member of the prestigious Mechlin Duchy. A heavy, tense silence fills the room as the two women remain locked in a fierce and unyielding stare-down. Carolyn warns that rumors of the Lady Mechlin's petty behavior could tarnish the entire family's dignity and social standing. A sharp rhythmic clacking sounds as Caroline announces her departure and walks away, leaving the boutique staff in shock. Stepping into the sunlight, Carolyn exhales a long, heavy sigh as the carriage driver greets her with confused surprise. A steady, muffled tapping sounds as Carolyn walks, reflecting privately on whether her emotional outburst was a tactical mistake. A dull, heavy thud sounds as the blonde woman finally sits, her body language reflecting a sense of total exhaustion. Resting on a stone bench, Carolyn wonders how she managed to survive her previous life before her current return. A soft, sudden rustle sounds as a masked man approaches, noting that Carolyn has returned to the same spot. The mysterious man stands tall, his shimmering silver hair and intricate black mask creating an air of elegant secrecy. A stylized illustration depicts the blonde duchess and the black-haired duke standing together in formal, high-collared military uniforms. Standing near a bubbling fountain, the masked stranger watches as Carolyn remains seated on the park bench in contemplation. The silver-haired man coughs politely, expressing his concern that his sudden departure earlier might have caused her some distress. Carolyn is startled by his courtesy, internally scolding herself for being so rude as to remain seated well low. A quick, sharp rustle sounds as she stands and bows, assuring the masked man that his departure was fine. When asked about her companions, Carolyn vaguely explains that they parted ways due to an unexpected situation that arose. She claims she is merely taking a walk, yet wonders why a nobleman would wander alone without any escort. The silver-haired man rests a gloved hand against his chest. His posture remains remarkably refined and composed throughout. Carolyn looks at him with growing suspicion, wondering if this stranger's sudden helpfulness indicates that he is a weirdo. She politely declines his offer of assistance, while he gently urges her not to feel any discomfort from his presence. The masked man smiles slightly as he acknowledges her response, though his gaze remains fixed on her with intensity. He stands motionless in the bright courtyard, the sunlight glinting off the intricate silver details of his formal clothing. Hearing the name Lennox, Carolyn feels a strange sense of familiarity despite never having met the man before today. She reflects that the name feels like someone she has longed for over a very long and difficult time. The silver-haired man offers his help to an approaching individual while Carolyn recognizes the new arrival with a shock. A bold text notification identifies the newcomer as Baron Edgar von Nestro, a man of significant noble status. The man reveals long dark purple hair and a stoic expression, his sharp gaze surveying the scene with cold indifference. Carolyn reflects on the rarity of seeing an aristocrat from the prestigious Baden family in such an ordinary area. Studying his delicate facial features and pale skin, she realizes he looks exactly like a portrait she studied recently. A soft, quick rustle sounds as Carolyn clenches her blue dress, sensing that Baron Nestro is remarkably cold and demanding. Eleanor von Mechlin bows deeply as she formally introduces herself to the two noblemen. Eleanor wonders internally how others would react if they knew her true identity as the Princess of Hartmann. Startled, Eleanor reacts as Lennox acknowledges her rank as the Duchess of Mechl. Baron Nestro offers a polite bow, apologizing for failing to offer a proper greeting first. Lennox also bows, formally requesting the chance to properly greet Lady Mechlin once again. Eleanor is taken aback, questioning if she has ever received such respect in Baden. A sudden soft rustle sounds as a hand rests against a formal vest in a refined gesture. Baron Nestro questions why Lennox is speaking to a stranger while Lennox defends her status as Duchess. Observing the pair, Eleanor reflects on their strange, overly formal relationship that defies easy categorization. Eleanor politely announces her departure, preparing to leave the two noblemen to their business. A sharp, quick click sounds as Eleanor takes a decisive step away from the fountain. As she hurries away, Eleanor lets out a surprise sound while the men watch her departure. A sudden, loud shout sounds as someone calls out to Eleanor, causing her to stop abruptly. Catching up, Lennox asks for a favor while Eleanor questions what he could possibly want. Lennox politely asks for some of her time, suggesting they share a cup of tea together. Eleanor stares in stunned silence, clearly caught off guard by the masked man's sudden invitation. The scene shifts to an overhead view of the trio walking through a sprawling, sunlit garden. Marveling at the garden, Eleanor wonders if Lennox's status allows him to own such a magnificent property. Addressing him by name, Eleanor asks Lennox a question as they continue their walk. Baron Nestro reveals the location's significance, explaining it was once the palace of the former empress. Shocked by the revelation, Eleanor realizes she is standing in a palace of the deceased empress. Studying Lennox, Eleanor wonders if his connection to the palace implies he belongs to the imperial family. A quick, soft rustle sounds as Nestro urges her to keep her visit to this palace secret. Lennox places a hand on Nestro's shoulder, creating a moment of visible tension between the two. Assuring her everything is fine, Lennox suggests that Nestro's intense demeanor might be causing her discomfort. Nestro quickly apologizes for the misunderstanding, insisting that he is actually a well-mannered individual. Lennox teases Nestro about revealing the current situation, prompting Nestro to demand he stop the joke. In a chippy-style exchange, Nestro scolds Lennox for almost mentioning Lady Joshua while Eleanor feels confused. Watching their bickering, Eleanor remains uncertain if the two noblemen are actually friends or enemies. Lennox shifts the topic, asking if Eleanor finds it difficult to adjust to her life in Baden. Eleanor admits she is still adjusting after a month, noting that only the food feels familiar. Clarifying his intent, Lennox asks if she feels lonely among the strangers in this new land. Nestro scolds Lennox for prying, asserting that the Duchess is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. Eleanor reflects on how others perceive her life as easy despite the complex reality she faces. The two lock eyes in a tense moment of mutual observation as their conversation reaches its peak. Eleanor notes that the masked man seems to have many questions regarding her personal life. Lennox simply confirms that he indeed has many things he wishes to know about her. Looking at him with a critical gaze, Eleanor bluntly asks him what his true nature is. Changing the subject again, Lennox reaches out and asks if she has an affinity for flowers. A heavy, muffled thud sounds as the scene shifts to the interior of a grand palace. A man with brown hair and a blue military uniform stands in a quiet, ornate hallway. In a study, the teal-haired man apologizes, admitting he has no information regarding the current situation. Lord Wallstein expresses frustration that the king's own bodyguard is unaware of the monarch's current location. The teal-haired bodyguard reflects on the impossibility of doing his job without being informed of His Majesty. Lord Wallstein decides to wait in his office, promising to alert the bodyguard when the king returns. Walking alone, Lord Wallstein finds it incredibly suspicious that the king kept his whereabouts a complete secret. Looking ahead with a furrowed brow, Lord Wallstein wonders where the king could have possibly disappeared to. A soft, sudden creak sounds as someone knocks, asking if Lord Wallstein is busy at the moment. A man with red-brown hair enters, and Lord Wallstein joyfully welcomes him back as his godfather. Lord Wallstein invites the older man into the room to talk since he is currently waiting. A soft, quick clack sounds as teacups are placed upon the table during a meeting. The red-haired man hopes his visit is not a disruption, but Lord Wallstein welcomes him warmly. Lord Wallstein reports that the old duchess is thriving, much to the red-haired man's relief and gratitude. A heavy silence falls as Lord Wallstein laments that the late duke did not live longer. Lord Wallstein remains wary, suspecting that his visitor has arrived with a very specific hidden agenda. There must be a reason for this visit, Lord Wallstein thinks as he takes a sip. A focused, silent moment passes as the nobleman sips his tea while considering the situation carefully. Lord Wallstein questions if his guest knows of the Empress Dowager's current search for a new maid. Lord Wallstein explains that official documents were distributed to every department for the recruitment starting next week. The red-haired man asks Lord Wallstein if he has had any recent contact with young Brianna. Lord Wallstein confirms they met briefly at the palace to share a cup of tea recently. The man reveals his daughter's sudden ambition to serve as a maid for the Empress Dowager. The red-haired man warns that any minor mistake in the palace could lead to a swift expulsion. He describes the palace as a treacherous place filled with petty conflicts, ugly sights, and constant humiliation. With an intense, red-eyed gaze, the man asks if Lord Wallstein will grant him a favor. Lord Wallstein asks for clarification, prompting the red-haired man to request help for Brianna's palace adjustment. Lord Wallstein realizes his high-ranking position would indeed make it very easy for Brianna to enter. Lord Wallstein reflects on why his mother has been mentioning Brianna so frequently in recent conversations. The red-haired man worries that his request is a burden, while Lord Wallstein looks on surprised. Lord Wallstein agrees to help and promises to discuss the matter with His Majesty very soon. Sunlight glints off a cluster of delicate pale roses blooming beautifully within the Grand Imperial Garden. Walking through the grounds, Eleanor marvels at the stunning beauty of the former Empress's private garden. Eleanor notices Lennox's impressive height, wondering if he is actually as tall as her husband, Ernst. Lennox gestures toward the path, inviting Eleanor to visit the nearby artificial pond together with him. A moment of hesitation passes as Eleanor looks at the masked man's outstretched hand in contemplation. Eleanor accepts the invitation, allowing the silver-haired nobleman to gently guide her toward the garden pond. Lennox notes that the neglected pond used to be quite beautiful when it was properly maintained. Curiously, Eleanor asks the masked man about his origins, hoping to learn more about his identity. The question causes a stir as Lennox and Baron Nestro react with visible surprise and shock. Lennox laughs, asking if she has met many nobles, but she admits only studying their registers. In a small chibi scene, Eleanor admits she could never memorize the countless nobles in Baden. Lennox praises her humility but suggests his mysterious mask is why she is prying into his background. A soft, quick tap sounds as Lennox adjusts his mask, his eyes reflecting a hidden amusement. Baron Nestro calls out to Lennox, drawing everyone's attention during their walk through the bright garden. Eleanor waves her hands nervously, assuring the nobleman that everything is perfectly fine and not to worry. Eleanor reasons that since he is friends with Baron Jaeger, his noble identity must be legitimate. A heavy, expectant silence follows as Lennox stares at the blonde duchess without saying a single word. The scene shifts to a deep purple night sky filled with a vast field of twinkling stars. A rhythmic, low trot sounds as a horse-drawn carriage pulls up to the manor's massive iron gates. Lennox offers his hand to assist Eleanor as she steps down from the carriage into the moonlight. Both Lennox and Eleanor admit to having a wonderful time during their unexpected meeting in the garden. Lennox's promise of a future meeting startles Eleanor as she stands holding a single pink rose. A quiet internal question wonders if another meeting with the mysterious masked man will actually be possible. Eleanor agrees to the sentiment and politely announces that she must now take her final leave. A rhythmic, soft patter sounds as Eleanor walks away, still clutching the rose she was given. Reaching the gates alone, Eleanor lets out a long, weary sigh as she reflects on the day. Looking back at the manor, Eleanor decides it is finally time for her to head back inside. A slow, low creak sounds as Eleanor opens the heavy front door and steps into the entryway. The brown-haired maid cries out in shock and surprise upon seeing the young lady return so late. The maid reveals the mother-in-law's search, while Eleanor quickly asks about the Duke's current whereabouts and status. The blonde-haired lady declines her maid's offer to inform the master of her late arrival. Observing the staff's hushed whispers, Eleanor realizes that Carolyn caused a massive scene earlier today. Eleanor vividly recalls the chaos at the tailor shop and suspects Carolyn continued her outburst. A sudden quick knock echoes through the silent hallway as a hand strikes the door. Standing outside the ornate double doors, the blonde lady calmly announces her return to the manor. A soft, quick click sounds as Eleanor pushes the door open and steps into the room. A sharp, sudden crack rings out as Carolyn delivers a brutal slap to Eleanor's unsuspecting face. The title card for the 6th chapter introduces the theme of the Duchess's elegant rebellion. Carolyn rages at Eleanor, accusing her of causing public embarrassment at her favorite tailor's boutique. A fierce, sudden rush sounds as the older woman raises her hand to strike once more. A sudden, firm grip sounds as a hand catches Carolyn's wrist midair, halting the second blow. Shocked and furious, Carolyn demands to be released as Eleanor firmly tells her to stop. Eleanor questions if Carolyn intends to prove her low class by continuing to resort to violence. A sudden, sharp tug sounds as Eleanor holds fast while Carolyn demands her immediate release. Eleanor promises to let go only if the older woman offers a proper apology first. Demanding an apology, Eleanor questions why she must endure constant insults and scolding from her. Carolyn erupts in a crimson-backed rage, screaming at Eleanor for daring to forget her social place. Face twisted in raw fury, the older woman screams at the top of her lungs. Carolyn laments that Eleanor ruined her marriage plans for Ernst and is now usurping her family. The woman refuses to let someone from a fallen nation take over the Mecklem family legacy. Screaming the butler's name, Carolyn calls for immediate assistance to deal with the rebellious young lady. A sudden, loud bang sounds as Gilbert bursts through the doors to answer his mistress's call. Pointing aggressively, Carolyn orders Gilbert to seize Eleanor at once while the butler remains bewildered. A sudden rough scuffle sounds as Gilbert apologetically restrains the young lady from behind. Struggling against the butler's hold, Eleanor is called a brat by the vengeful and angry Carolyn. A sudden sharp clack sounds as Carolyn snatches a pair of scissors from the nearby table. Wielding the scissors menacingly, Carolyn approaches as Eleanor desperately pleads with her to stop. A sudden violent snip sounds as Carolyn lunges forward, aiming for the young lady's golden hair. A sudden sharp snap sounds as the scissors cut through Eleanor's beautiful long blonde locks. A soft sudden sob sounds as Eleanor remains paralyzed while her hair is cruelly shorn away. A soft quick thud sounds as Carolyn drops the scissors, finally feeling a sense of calm. Carolyn orders Gilbert to lock the girl in the attic for 3 days without any food. 2 months before the Duke's birthday, the manor servants discuss the immense workload they face. A maid questions where Gilbert is going with a large box filled with various official documents. In a chibi-style exchange, Gilbert explains he is delivering these specific documents to the young lady. Looking visibly distressed, the butler hesitates before continuing his assigned task for the day. A slow rhythmic step sounds as a pair of boots walks across the dark wooden floor. Entering the dimly lit attic room, Gilbert offers a nervous greeting to the short-haired young lady. Sitting at her desk, Eleanor acknowledges the butler's arrival with a calm and measured response. A soft, quick tap sounds as Gilbert sets the box down, citing tasks from the madam. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor spots an unexpected document hidden among the pile. Looking at the paper with wide eyes, Eleanor is visibly stunned by what she has discovered. Staring at the ornate palace interior, the young lady lets out a faint sound of pure confusion. A voice questions the announcement regarding an open recruitment for a new imperial lady-in-waiting. Several high-ranking noblewomen gather for an elegant afternoon tea session within a grand sunlit parlor. Sipping her tea, a noblewoman wonders if holding a public recruitment would be excessively troublesome. A soft, quiet sip sounds as the short-haired lady focuses on the tea in her cup. The noblewoman notes that many ladies have already approached her seeking a recommendation for the post. Considering her options, the lady reflects on the necessity of choosing someone to maintain her social face. Suggesting an alternative, the brown-haired woman believes a simple recommendation would be more than sufficient. The short-haired blonde lady asks Lady Berenice for her opinion on the public recruitment plan. A soft, quick click sounds as Lady Berenice sets down her tea, favoring an open recruitment. The dark-haired lady explains her stance, citing the importance of finding a worthy successor to Latzi. Looking skeptical, Carolyn questions why they must be so extremely cautious about a simple recruitment. The older woman believes that any candidate would be sufficient as long as they are properly trained. Lady Berenice's intense blue eyes sharpen as she questions if they truly understand the Marchioness's duties. A sudden, nervous flinch sounds as Carolyn dismissively claims the previous lady simply did their work. Berenice counters that the Marchioness served as the Empress's close representative, requiring far more than skill. Considering the points made, the Empress Dowager agrees that a public recruitment would provide more fairness. The brown-haired woman notes that current recommendations give even less reason to agree with the usual process. Intense blue eyes gaze ahead as Berenice questions if the recommended ladies can truly be loyal. The dark-haired woman admits her vote was cast specifically to find someone with genuine loyalty. Looking downcast, the lady in black confesses her inability to trust the candidates suggested by others. A soft, quick nod sounds as the narrative notes the Empress Dowager is the Emperor's only support. Brianna gasps in shock, asking the Empress Dowager why she would say something so unexpected. The red-eyed lady pleads for the Empress to retract the absurd words about being past her prime. Carolyn realizes that Lady Berenice was used by the Empress Dowager to indirectly express her intentions. A faint, satisfied smile plays on the short-haired blonde woman's lips as she makes her decision. The Empress Dowager formally announces her intention to proceed with the open recruitment process immediately. A soft, quick bow sounds as Carolyn promises to get everything ready for the recruitment right away. A glimmer of curiosity fills the Empress Dowager's gaze as she looks forward to meeting new ladies. Sunlight filters through the high windows of the Grand Hall as the palace meeting finally concludes. A close-up reveals the elegant, deep purple folds of a noblewoman's dress as she rests alone. Pondering the news, Carolyn considers how she can use the public recruitment to her own advantage. The woman realizes she could finally keep an eye on the Empress Dowager's often adversarial palace. A sudden soft rustle sounds as a butler approaches the seated noblewoman to deliver a message. A soft, quick bow sounds as the servant announces the arrival of a guest for the madam. The butler identifies the guest as Lady Brianna, catching Carolyn by complete surprise. A sudden, quick rustle sounds as Carolyn stands up with a look of pure, startled joy. A rhythmic, soft click sounds as Brianna's heels approach the room where Carolyn is waiting. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Carolyn excitedly calls out to Brianna with open arms. Looking radiant, the red-haired Brianna offers a warm and gentle smile to the older woman. A soft, quick bow sounds as Brianna offers a polite greeting after their long time apart. A sudden, quick rustle sounds as Carolyn warmly pulls Brianna onto the sofa for a chat. Reaching out, Brianna presents a small, elegantly wrapped gift that she brought for Carolyn's enjoyment. The box contains a stunning, ornate silver brooch set with a large, sparkling purple gemstone. Carolyn is completely enchanted by the beautiful gift, while Brianna is happy that she likes it. A soft, quick pat sounds as Carolyn takes Brianna's hands, lamenting her lack of return gifts. Carolyn sighs over Ernst's political marriage, wishing she could have welcomed Brianna into the Mecklin family. Brianna mentions marital happiness, but Carolyn reveals that Ernst and the princess are living separately. Carolyn rages about the heartless princess and her stiff pride, which the older woman cannot stand. Brianna offers words of comfort, urging Carolyn to stay strong despite her frustrations with her daughter-in-law. Carolyn suddenly pauses to ask Brianna about the specific reason for her visit today. A sudden quick grin sounds as Brianna asks if Carolyn has heard about the imperial recruitment. A realization begins to dawn on Carolyn as she considers the possibilities of Brianna's request. A sudden quick smirk sounds as Carolyn decides that she will personally recommend Brianna for the post. Back at her desk, the short-haired blonde lady reviews the many official documents that have arrived. Lady Berenice asks the Empress Dowager if there is anything specific bothering her about the recruitment. A close-up reveals the formal recommendation letter submitted by Carolyn, the lady of the Mecklin family. Berenice reads the letter's request to look after the young lady from the Leju Marquise family. A sudden soft rustle sounds as a hand reviews a formal letter within the palace. Noting the recommendations for Ernst's new partner, the Empress Dowager asks if Berenice means the Princess of Hartmann. Looking troubled, the dark-haired lady-in-waiting clutches the documents as she reflects on the complicated situation. Shimmering particles fill the air as the scene shifts toward a painful memory of the past. Recalling a wedding that brought only misery, the narrative notes the Baden nobles never welcomed the princess. A close-up reveals the sharp, intense focus in the Empress Dowager's deep violet eyes. Berenice says Lady Brianna has much experience, noting her unique temple volunteer work sets her apart. Closing her eyes, the Empress Dowager admits that she found that specific part refreshing as well. Looking at the documents, the Empress Dowager says she is not particularly looking forward to the Hartmann princess. A sudden quick smirk sounds as the Empress Dowager agrees with the assessment while hiding her true intent. Lost in thought, the blonde-haired lady rests her chin on her hand to consider her next move. Recalling Carolyn from her youth, the Empress Dowager notes the older woman has always been very harsh. Holding the recommendation, the lady admits she is curious to see what Carolyn is currently up to. Despite the princess's poor reputation, the lady-in-waiting believes there must be a reason for her recommendation. The blonde-haired woman wonders if she should tear up the recommendation or respond in an extravagant way. Making her final decision, the Empress Dowager orders a carriage sent to House Mecklin by tomorrow. The Empress Dowager instructs Berenice to bring the girl herself, prompting a polite and respectful bow. A thought bubble appears, suggesting that no matter the scheme, the Empress is prepared to act. A sudden, quick grin sounds as the Empress Dowager resolves to play along for the time being. A sudden, loud stomp sounds as a frantic butler runs through the hallway toward his mistress. A sudden loud bang sounds as the butler bursts through the doors, shouting that it is a big deal. Carolyn asks about the commotion as the bowing butler apologizes, explaining that it is an urgent matter. Face pale with shock, the older woman demands to know exactly what the servant just said. Demanding an explanation for the palace carriage, Carolyn is told they arrived to escort the young madam. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Carolyn's face twists in a mixture of disbelief and fury. Gripping her necklace, the enraged older woman screams Eleanor's name at the top of her lungs. A rhythmic soft click sounds as a pair of blue heels ascends the wind stairs rapidly. A sudden sharp whoosh sounds as the door is flung open to reveal the target of Carolyn's rage. Reaching out, Carolyn grabs Eleanor's arm and curses the young lady, calling her a wench. Carolyn asks what on earth she has been up to, but Eleanor is confused about her majesty. A sudden quick smirk sounds as Eleanor notes that her majesty has apparently taken a liking to her. Teeth bared in a snarl, Carolyn curses the young lady, calling her a truly despicable wench. A sudden, rough scuffle sounds as Carolyn pins Eleanor onto the bed in a violent outburst. The butler reports that the person from the palace is waiting downstairs, making Carolyn pause her assault. Ordering her immediate washing, Carolyn mutters that she will not let Eleanor off easy once this ends. Looking back with cold blue eyes, the short-haired young lady remains silent despite the looming threats. Standing beside the grand carriage, Lady Berenice waits as the ladies of the house approach the courtyard. Bowing her head slightly, the lady-in-waiting tells Carolyn and Eleanor that they will be leaving now. Forcing a fake smile, Carolyn tells Eleanor to have a good trip, claiming she will be cheering. Carolyn mutters a threat about dealing with Eleanor upon her return while the girl ignores the comment. Taking one last look at the manor, Eleanor remains stoic as she prepares to depart. A sudden, nervous flinch sounds as Carolyn watches the carriage pull away from the mansion gates. Standing alone in the courtyard, Carolyn watches the departing carriage with a deeply suspicious expression. A rhythmic soft squeak sounds as a hand waves goodbye while the carriage vanishes into the distance. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Carolyn realizes with horror that the girl has no plans to return. A rhythmic soft rattle sounds as Berenice and Eleanor sit in silence inside the moving carriage. Breaking the long silence, the dark-haired lady-in-waiting addresses the short-haired young lady as my lady. Berenice notes that Eleanor has no imperial connections and has yet to make her official social debut. Offering a warm and genuine smile, the lady-in-waiting promises to assist Eleanor if she needs any help. A sudden, quick grin sounds as Eleanor reflects on hearing such a kind offer for the first time. A sudden, bewildered look crosses Baroness Berenice's face as she reacts to a surprising realization. Looking pensive, the dark-haired lady-in-waiting gazes downward, her expression clouded with serious, unspoken concerns. A hazy memory depicts a rainy execution platform where the short-haired blonde lady once knelt before a jeering crowd. Recalling a past life, the narrator identifies Count Verdict as the one who interrogated her during a false accusation. Despite her regression, the young lady remembers how the Count held secrets even the Duke was unaware of. A cold resolve settles in as Berenice determines she must be wary of anyone associated with Count Verdict. Standing in his office, the silver-haired Ernst looks visibly unsettled as he ponders the latest news from the manor. The dark-haired assistant confirms that Berenice personally went to escort the Duchess of Mechlin back to the palace. Ernst touches his chin, questioning why his mother would involve Eleanor in such a public recruitment process. Noticing the Emperor's distress, the assistant urges him to be careful with his words while inside the palace walls. Ernst worries that the high-ranking nobility already holds a deep-seated grudge against the Princess of Hartmann. The dark-haired subordinate pauses, politely asking his master if he may pose a personal question. A sudden loud bang sounds as Ernst slams the table when asked if he knew the Duchess previously. Recalling Ernst's uncharacteristic excitement during their meeting, the assistant wonders about the true nature of their relationship. Laughing awkwardly to ease the tension, the man suggests that the Emperor was acting very suspiciously earlier. Looking annoyed, the chibi-styled Ernst asks if the man is obsessed with him or suffering from an Emperor complex. Ernst stares blankly at his subordinate, asking if he truly intends to keep his secrets hidden. Bowing respectfully, the dark-haired man announces that he will be taking his leave for the day. A sudden, sharp whoosh sounds as the silver-haired ruler turns away to focus on his own thoughts. Gazing out the tall palace windows, Ernst wonders what schemes his mother is currently plotting regarding his wife. A sudden sharp clap sounds as a palace official captures the attention of the gathered candidates. The older proctor instructs the assembled group of noblewomen to gather together for the formal orientation. Diverse groups of elegantly dressed ladies stand scattered across the grand marble-floored hall in quiet anticipation. The proctor outlines a rigorous schedule, detailing written exams for the morning and personal interviews for the afternoon. A sudden quick rustle sounds as a brown-haired candidate steps forward to address the official with a question. The green-eyed lady asks for confirmation on the one-day timeline, which the proctor affirms is correct. The proctor acknowledges the concerns about the rushed pace while maintaining her professional, calm demeanor. Looking confident, Lady Brianna remarks that the speed is irrelevant since the outcome is already a certainty. A formal notice highlights Lady Brianna's strong recommendation from her close friend, the elder Lady Caroline. Bathed in a radiant glow, the red-haired Brianna presents an image of perfect, noble grace and beauty. Standing apart from the others, the short-haired Eleanor remains silent as she observes the competitive atmosphere. A lingering question arises as the narrative wonders why Caroline would recommend the Hartmann princess as well. Looking stoic and detached, the blonde-haired Eleanor waits patiently for the recruitment process to officially begin. A moment of stillness settles over the Grand Palace corridors as the first phase of the recruitment concludes. The proctor commends the ladies for their effort on the written exam before inviting them to a lavish banquet. A rhythmic, soft click sounds as a knife cuts through a tender steak during the midday feast. Seated at the long table, various candidates discuss their poor performance on the morning's difficult written test. A group of ladies whisper amongst themselves, casting judging looks toward the woman sitting at the far end. The gossipers identify the solitary, blonde-haired diner as the Hartmann princess, questioning her audacity to attend. The group mocks the princess's supposed lack of culture and extravagance, claiming her own father gave up on her. Sipping her tea calmly, Eleanor reflects that these petty insults are nothing compared to her past life suffering. A sudden, sharp bang sounds as Brianna slams the table to silence the cruel rumor spreading through the room. Looking indignant, Brianna asks the group if it isn't cruel to mock a duchess who was already disrespected at home. Brianna sighs as she reveals the scandalous rumor that the Duke and Duchess sleep in separate chambers. The gathered ladies gasp in horror at the news that the couple never even shared a wedding night. A fork pauses in midair as the gossipers realize the marriage is a complete sham in all but name. Looking smugly toward Eleanor, Brianna silently thinks that the humiliation serves the princess right for her past actions. A rhythmic, soft click sounds as Eleanor stands up and begins walking toward the table where Brianna is seated. A tense silence falls over the room as the short-haired blonde confronts the red-haired woman directly. Leaning in close, Eleanor tells Brianna that her petty behavior clearly shows she still harbors feelings for the Duke. Addressing the red-haired lady, Eleanor suggests that being rejected by the Duke must be very disheartening. A group of candidates gasps as they overhear the shocking news of Lady Brianna's rejection. Looking quite composed, the blonde-haired young lady admits that she actually feels a bit uncomfortable now. Eyes wide with fury, the red-haired Brianna reacts with intense jealousy to the Duchess's biting comments. The gathered ladies whisper in shock, questioning why the haughty lady would be acting this way. A sudden loud bang sounds as Brianna slams the table and shouts that everything is lies. Brianna demands to know what false rumors are being spread, while Eleanor insists she is stating facts. Pointing an accusing finger, the red-haired woman demands an apology under the threat of informing Lady Caroline. A sudden, quick smirk sounds as the short-haired blonde reacts with amusement to the empty threat. Eleanor accuses Brianna of spreading malicious rumors about the Duke and Duchess sleeping in separate rooms. Brianna defiantly maintains that it is a well-known fact that the couple sleeps in separate chambers. Looking calm, the blonde-haired young lady asks if she may also be allowed to speak the truth. A hazy memory depicts a weeping Brianna clinging to Ernst, desperately begging him not to abandon her. Standing tall, Eleanor remains unmoved as Brianna dismisses her accusations as nothing more than nonsense intimidation. Touching her chin thoughtfully, Eleanor notes that despite Brianna's desperate behavior toward Ernst in the past, Eleanor notes that the Duke still failed to see the red-haired lady as a romantic interest. Shaking with visible humiliation, the red-haired woman glares at the short-haired blonde in absolute silent rage. Candidates at the banquet table murmur in confusion, wondering exactly how the lady supposedly clung to him. Looking visibly shaken, Brianna worries about the consequences if rumors of her past actions were to spread. Her face pale with shock, the red-haired woman struggles to speak as her confidence completely shatters. Looking down with cold blue eyes, Eleanor mockingly asks if the lady could not hear her words. A sudden, frantic apology sounds as Brianna bows deeply, stunning the noblewomen watching from the table. The scene shifts to the orientation hall where the candidates sit together in a heavy, awkward silence. Reflecting on the outcome, the narrative notes that Brianna's pride is crushed and the gossiping is stopped. A rhythmic, soft step sounds as a pair of blue heels moves forward toward the interview room. A sudden, loud announcement sounds as a palace official calls candidate number 58 into the chamber. Bathed in a radiant light, the short-haired Eleanor steps forward to face her final personal interview. Standing before the seated court, the blonde-haired young lady prepares to address the high-ranking noble examiners. Keeping her hands folded politely, the candidate maintains a professional and respectful posture during the formal orientation. Bowing her head deeply, Eleanor offers a formal greeting, wishing the glory of light upon Her Majesty. A rhythmic, soft nod sounds as the Empress Dowager acknowledges the greeting and offers her blessing. Looking suspicious, the older examiner in red thinks that it would be troublesome if Eleanor performs well. The Empress Dowager grants the young lady permission to raise her head and begin the interview process. Looking up with clear blue eyes, Eleanor stares silently at the Empress as the tension increases. Leaning forward slightly, the silver-haired Empress Dowager asks the candidate for her specific reason for applying here. Looking resolute, the short-haired blonde states clearly that she did not come for the expected position. Eleanor reveals to the shocked examiners that she has no intention of becoming a lady-in-waiting. Bowing her head once more, Eleanor makes the stunning request to be employed as a mere maid. A heavy silence fills the chamber as the high-ranking noblewoman reflects on the Duchess's unexpected proposal. Outraged, the red-clothed examiner exclaims that applying for such a lowly position tarnishes the Duchess's family honor. Narrowing her eyes, the Empress Dowager asks why a duchess would ever desire such a lowly position. A rhythmic, soft step sounds as Eleanor declares that she understands her social standing quite well. Eleanor declares that as a loyal citizen, she is willing to perform any task to serve Her Majesty. Standing alone before the examiners, the young lady remains stoic despite the weight of their judging stares. Seated beside the Empress, the dark-haired Berenice watches the proceedings with an unreadable and professional expression. The narrative highlights that the relationship between Eleanor and Caroline is far from being a good one. A dark revelation confirms that Caroline had cruelly kept the young Duchess confined within a manor attic. Looking intrigued, the Empress notes Eleanor's confidence and asks if she can handle truly difficult tasks. A sudden firm clench sounds as Eleanor's hand tightens, proving her silent resolve to endure any challenge. Shimmering light fills the grand chamber as the interview ends, leaving the gathered nobility in stunned silence. Standing before the examiners, the short-haired blonde expresses her willingness to follow the Empress Dowager's commands. Eleanor bows respectfully, stating that she will comply with whatever task the silver-haired majesty deems necessary for her. A sudden soft swish sounds as the blonde-haired young lady reaches out to take the Empress's hand. Bathed in a soft light, Eleanor lowers her head in a formal gesture of absolute loyalty and service. Looking skeptical, the silver-haired Empress Dowager observes the candidate's dramatic display with a cold, measuring gaze. Looking quite resolute, the blonde-haired Duchess waits in tense silence for the high-ranking noblewoman's final decision. Clasping her hands together, the brown-haired Berenice excitedly compares the candidate's sincere gesture to a knight's solemn oath. A sudden sharp thud sounds as the older examiner in red stands up, calling the candidate's behavior impertinent. A rhythmic soft laugh sounds as the Empress Dowager finds amusement in the young lady's unexpected and bold approach. Looking intrigued, the silver-haired Empress watches Eleanor with newfound interest as the intense interview session finally concludes. Seated in his office, the silver-haired Ernst looks over a document with a calm and focused expression. A sudden, sharp slide sounds as Ernst places a paper down while working alongside his dark-haired subordinate. Surrounded by piles of paperwork, the two men sit in an awkward silence within the Grand Palace study. A rhythmic soft click sounds as a palace official enters a room to deliver an important message. A sudden quiet rustle sounds as the brown-haired official bows to the Majesty and addresses him formally. Ernst looks up as the official announces the Empress Dowager has chosen her lady-in-waiting, asking for further details. The official reports that Lady Brianna was selected, to which the silver-haired Ernst remarks that the news is good. Looking mischievous, the official adds that Brianna was not the only lady selected for the coveted palace position. A sudden, sharp stop sounds as the dark-haired man freezes in shock upon learning the Duchess was also selected. A sudden, soft chuckle sounds as the silver-haired Ernst reacts with dark amusement to the Duke's visible agitation. Looking out the window, the short-haired blonde reflects on her new assignment living within the Empress Dowager's palace. Standing in her quarters, Eleanor notes that avoiding a return to House Mechlin was her main objective for applying. Looking determined, the blonde-haired young lady vows to catch the Empress's eye to fulfill her own greater purpose. A sudden rhythmic knock sounds as the dark-haired Duke reacts with confusion to a sound at the door. A sudden loud creak sounds as Eleanor enters the room, causing the Duke to mistake her for Countess Lorenz. Grabbing her roughly, the dark-haired man demands to see her face as he forces her into the room's center. A rhythmic, heavy step sounds as the Duke approaches the blonde-haired young lady while she lets out a gasp. Looking down at her, the dark-haired man mockingly tells the Duchess that her current appearance is a sight to behold. Looking angry, the purple-eyed Duke asks what on earth she was thinking when she applied to be a lady-in-waiting. A sudden sharp glint sounds as the Duke's eyes fill with cold fury while he stares at his wife. A sudden, firm grab sounds as the dark-haired man seizes Eleanor's neck, accusing her of staging a rebellion. Gripping her tightly, the Duke blames his mother for the situation, but the blonde-haired Duchess reacts with confusion. Looking pained, Eleanor reveals to her husband that Caroline personally cut her hair with her own two hands. Eleanor explains that Caroline had a servant hold her down and forcibly cut her hair before locking her up. Looking defensive, the dark-haired man calls her a liar, but Eleanor asks if he truly knows everything about his mother. Looking sinister, the short-haired blonde leans in and begins to mention a secret concerning the Duke's own son. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as the dark-haired man's grip on her neck tightens in a fit of rage. Looking murderous, the Duke warns his wife that she has significant nerve for spewing such nonsense and lies. Squeezing her throat, the dark-haired man tells Eleanor to speak honestly about hating his mother instead of spreading petty lies. Tears streaming down her face, the blonde-haired young lady realizes that the Duke is incapable of ever changing. A sudden, quick release sounds as the man lets go, declaring that she can keep her lady-in-waiting position. Looking cold and detached, the dark-haired Duke prepares to leave the room after his aggressive and threatening confrontation. Walking away, the man warns the Duchess that he will eventually take her back to his manor regardless. A sudden loud bang sounds as the door slams shut, leaving the short-haired blonde alone in the silence. A rhythmic soft sob sounds as Eleanor stands alone in her chambers, mourning her hopeless and cruel situation. Walking through the moonlit gardens, the blonde-haired young lady laments that she truly has nowhere else to go. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor is startled by an unexpected figure appearing in the dark night. Bathed in moonlight, a silver-haired man wearing an ornate masquerade mask stares at her with a gentle expression. Looking concerned, the masked stranger softly asks the blonde-haired Duchess if she has been well since their last encounter. A sudden formal bow sounds as the masked man greets her, calling their meeting a wonderful stroke of coincidence. A sudden soft rustle sounds as the blonde-haired Duchess stands close to the masked Lord Lenik. Looking at his dark clothes, the short-haired Eleanor remarks that his attire today is a bit unusual. Looking playful, the masked man asks if he is suspicious, and Eleanor confirms she thought he was a criminal. Lord Lennox suggests moving to a more private location, and the blonde-haired young lady asks for his suggestion. A sudden, quiet gasp sounds as the silver-haired man suggests returning to the East Palace garden. Looking hesitant, the short-haired Duchess wonders to herself if she can truly trust this mysterious masked stranger. A rhythmic soft step sounds as Lord Lennox offers to guide her while the blonde lady follows. Walking through the moonlit grounds, the masked man notes that the garden truly has a unique charm. Lord Lennox suggests making this their secret hideout, and Eleanor agrees that it is a comfortable place. A sudden sharp blink sounds as Eleanor questions the necessity of crawling through a small dog hole. A rhythmic soft laugh sounds as the masked man chuckles while Eleanor questions his noble status. Grabbing her dark skirt, the short-haired Duchess mentions that it was her first time crawling like that. A rhythmic soft step sounds as Eleanor apologizes for any offense, but Lennox insists it was fun. Looking surprised, the silver-haired man lets out a soft exclamation while staring at the blonde Duchess. Lord Lanark asks if her mindset has changed because she looks different, and Eleanor asks if she seems strange. Looking closely at her, the masked man tells the blue-eyed lady that her new look suits her well. Bathed in a soft light, the silver-haired Lord Lennox continues to gaze at his companion with a gentle expression. A sudden, quiet sigh sounds as the short-haired Duchess offers her sincere thanks for his kind words. Looking thoughtful, the blonde-haired young lady stares back at the masked man during their quiet nighttime meeting. Standing together in the garden, the two figures share a moment of calm under the shimmering night sky. Looking excited, Eleanor reveals that she has been appointed as a lady-in-waiting to the Empress Dowager. A sudden sharp blink sounds as the masked man states he is already aware of her new position. The short-haired blonde realizes that the selection process has become a major topic of gossip within the palace. Lord Lennox explains that the high level of attention is due to the Empress Dowager's very particular nature. A rhythmic soft laugh sounds as Eleanor calls the Empress a wonderful person, surprising the masked man. Looking happy, the Duchess explains that the Empress was the first person to truly listen to her story. Looking concerned, the silver-haired man questions her assessment as he reflects on the blonde lady's difficult circumstances. Eleanor expresses her gratitude, noting that staying at the palace allowed her to meet him once again. A sudden, sharp glint sounds as Lennox's eyes narrow while he reflects on the Duchess's refusal to commute. The narrative reflects on how the young Duchess should have been living a happy and comfortable life. Looking deeply troubled, the masked man wonders why on earth things turned out this way for her. A sudden, loud shout sounds as Caroline's voice echoes through the Grand Mecla Manor in a rage. Looking furious, the brown-haired Caroline paces across the room, feeling humiliated by recent events. A dark shadow falls as Caroline recalls the Duchess's final words before leaving for the palace. Looking angry, the dark-haired woman questions how the wretched Duchess managed to become a lady-in-waiting. A sudden quiet knock sounds as a servant enters to announce the arrival of an unexpected guest. Looking curious, the brown-haired lady learns from the servant that Countess Lorenz has come to visit. A sudden soft chuckle sounds as Caroline decides that this meeting is the perfect opportunity for news. Seated in the parlor, the purple-haired Countess Lorenz waits with a polite and expectant expression. Looking composed, the older lady in green greets Caroline and remarks on how long it has been. Countess Lorenz expresses her gratitude for Brianna's success, and Caroline praises the young lady's cleverness. A sudden, soft clink sounds as the two noble women prepare to share tea and discuss palace affairs. A sudden, quiet gasp sounds as the Countess brings up the subject of the Duchess of Hartmann. Looking annoyed, the older woman in green calls the young Duchess an audacious and disrespectful girl. Looking intrigued, Caroline realizes that the conversation she was hoping for has finally begun. Countess Lorenz reveals the shocking news that the Duchess requested to be employed as a maid. Looking sinister, the dark-haired Caroline realizes that this explains why the child is staying at the palace. Looking concerned, the purple-haired Countess prepares to share another piece of information with her host. A sudden, soft sip sounds as Caroline listens intently while continuing to drink her tea. Looking stunned, the brown-haired woman reacts with shock as the Countess mentions a mysterious letter of recommendation. Caroline is stunned to discover both ladies received the exact same recommendation letter. The sudden sharp gasp sounds as the brown-haired woman reels from the shocking discovery. Recovering her composure, the older woman tells her guest she was simply lost in thought. A sudden soft clink sounds as Caroline puts down her tea, enraged by the forgery. Looking sinister, the brown-haired lady wonders how to retaliate against the Duchess for her audacity. Standing together, the red-haired Brianna and blonde Eleanor prepare for their first palace duty. Looking formal, the two candidates stand before a panel of stern noblewomen within the palace. A sudden formal bow sounds as the ladies greet the Empress Dowager with deep respect. Seated regally, the blonde Empress Dowager informs the pair she has a specific task. Looking competitive, Brianna vows to fulfill any command while Eleanor maintains a calm, ready expression. The Empress Dowager explains her charitable organization's mission to provide aid to the city's poor. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as the candidates learn they must personally distribute soup today. Looking determined, Eleanor realizes this unexpected charity work is her very first official palace test. A rhythmic heavy roll sounds as the carriage wheels turn across the dry, dusty road. A sudden loud creak sounds as the carriage arrives at a desolate, poverty-stricken slum district. Stepping down, the two noble ladies attract attention as they arrive in the impoverished area. A sudden soft wheeze sounds as Brianna covers her nose in disgust at the environment. Looking revolted, the red-haired lady complains about the stench while Eleanor observes their surroundings quietly. Looking thoughtful, the blonde young lady reflects on the harsh reality of poverty within the kingdom. A sudden, quiet greeting sounds as a brown-haired man approaches to welcome the palace representatives. Introducing himself as Priest Gran, the man explains his role leading the relief organization's efforts. Looking polite, Eleanor introduces herself as the Empress's lady-in-waiting and asks to begin their work. A rhythmic, soft step sounds as Priest Gran leads the two noble women toward the distribution site. A sudden, soft sizzle sounds as steaming soup pots wait while the priest warns of dangers. Donning white aprons, Eleanor looks ready to serve, while Brianna remains silent and visibly uncomfortable. Looking kind, Priest Gran advises the ladies not to overexert themselves during the difficult task ahead. A sudden loud ring sounds as the priest swings a handbell to gather the hungry citizens. Looking concerned, the short-haired Eleanor notices that the served soup appears excessively watery and thin. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor reacts with shock to a sudden realization about the food. A sudden firm grab sounds as a gloved hand clenches fabric during a tense palace conversation. Seated inside a carriage, the blue-haired Aiden listens as someone mentions a saintess's ongoing prayers. A sudden light tap sounds as a gloved finger touches a cheek during a plea for affection. Looking cold, the blonde Hyperion dismissively tells his subordinate to warn Phoebe against her ongoing presumption. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Aiden reacts to Hyperion's cold declaration about leaving his side. Looking arrogant, the blonde Highness suggests the Saintess oversteps her bounds whenever she receives any attention. A sudden, soft breath sounds as the sweating Aiden tries to change the subject of conversation. Looking sinister, the brown-haired Caroline appears again, fueled by her dark plans to settle the score. Looking out the window, a voice questions why Lord Vavel shows no wariness toward Lady Veritas. Sitting together, the Chibi Hyperion suggests that Vavel simply likes the mysterious lady, surprising his aid. The narrative reflects on Lord Vavel's dark powers and absolute loyalty to his master's every instinct. Looking worried, the blue-haired aide wonders if Vavel's behavior is driven by a simple newfound curiosity. Looking mysterious, the blonde Hyperion stares ahead, cryptically remarking that the truth remains a total mystery. A sudden, soft whisper sounds as a white-haired girl pleads with Hyperion to always remember her. Looking pensive, the man reflects on the possibility that she is the one he has awaited. A sudden, loud bang sounds as an explosion occurs during a prisoner transfer, halting the carriage. Looking through the window, the white-haired Veritas learns that Lord Vavel has already handled the incident. A sudden, soft laugh sounds as guards discuss the neutralized offender who can no longer walk. A sudden, quiet sigh sounds as Veritas realizes the prisoner is fortunate to have only been caught. The scene shifts back to the carriage as attendants report that Lord Vavel has left a report. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as the white-haired lady reacts with shock to the unfolding palace events. A brown-haired man questions if the prince will be safe if Lord Vavel is injured. Looking relieved, the white-haired lady expresses her gratitude for the news regarding their safety. Lord Vavel returns to the carriage as the red-haired man and others offer their greetings. Entering the carriage, the black-haired man informs the white-haired lady that they must depart immediately. A rhythmic soft rumble sounds as the carriage carries the pair away from the palace grounds. The white-haired lady reflects on how the black-haired man and Rion bear a striking resemblance. Lost in thought, the blue-eyed lady continues to observe her companion during the quiet carriage ride. Looking pensive, the white-haired lady notices that a wound on his cheek seems to be troubling him. Veritas offers to wipe the blood from his face, asking the black-haired man if he is hurt. Looking confused, the Chibi Vavel with cat ears scans the floral pattern handkerchief she holds out. A sudden light flinch sounds as she daps his cheek, explaining it will stop the bleeding. Leaning closer, the white-haired lady tells the black-haired man that he should hold on to the cloth. Vavel blushes while holding the handkerchief, causing the white-haired lady to realize something about his personality. Looking at the blushing man, the white-haired lady finds his embarrassed reaction to be surprisingly cute. Back at the slums, the blonde Eleanor observes the relief soup and thinks it looks watery. The rhythmic soft step sounds as a hungry person approaches the distribution table with an empty bowl. A sudden low groan sounds as desperate citizens huddle together in the impoverished and dusty district. A sudden sharp scream sounds as chaos erupts, startling the red-haired Brianna and blonde Eleanor. Priest Gran commands the crowd to keep order as the two noble ladies watch with concern. The brown-haired priest sternly warns that those who do not line up will receive no food. Citizens offer their thanks as the group continues distributing the meager and thin servings of soup. Eleanor wonders about the sheer number of impoverished people while she and Brianna continue their work. A sudden, heavy thud sounds as a foot trips over a stone on the uneven ground. A sudden, sharp crash sounds as a freckled boy falls and spills his bowl of soup. The young boy looks down at the wasted food on the ground in a state of despair. Looking tearful, the freckled child asks Eleanor if he could please have one more serving. The red-haired Brianna shouts a firm refusal while the boy looks on with a hopeful expression. An angry man yells that the boy spilled the soup through his own careless mistake. The freckled child cries, pleading with the lady that he is simply so very hungry. A sudden firm grab sounds as the man tells the boy to scram while pulling him. A rhythmic quick tap sounds as Eleanor rushes over and demands that the man stop immediately. A sudden quiet chill sounds as the crowd falls silent during the tense and public confrontation. The atmosphere becomes heavy as the weight of the desperate situation settles over the slum. Looking skeptical, Brianna questions if Eleanor is actually going to give the child more soup. The boy continues to sob while Eleanor looks at him with a deeply pained expression. Priest Gran hurries toward the group, asking if something is the matter with the food distribution. The priest apologetically informs them that they have already handed out every bit of the rations. Brianna scoffs at the crying boy, remarking that it was his own fault the soup spilled. Eleanor places a hand on the boy's shoulder and gently tells him not to give up. Looking determined, the blonde lady prepares to make a bold move to help the hungry child. Eleanor raises her voice to address the crowd, announcing that she has a request for everyone. She explains to the onlookers that the child simply had an accident and spilled his only meal. Eleanor asks everyone for just one single spoon of soup to help the hungry and crying child. She bows deeply, stating that many small spoons together will create a full bowl for him. The blonde lady clarifies that she will not force anyone to share if they do not wish. A sudden low grunt sounds as the previously angry man looks away with a troubled face. The man huffs that he doesn't even have enough food for himself, turning his back. The freckled boy looks down in sadness as he realizes people are beginning to walk away. A sudden, soft gasp sounds as a woman looks back at the child with visible hesitation. A sudden, light exclamation sounds as someone finally steps forward, offering to share one spoon. A woman gives the boy soup because he reminds her of her daughter and he thanks her. Following her lead, more citizens step forward to share a portion of their meal with the boy. Eleanor watches with a soft gaze as the boy's empty bowl is finally filled by the crowd. Looking into the bowl, the broth now appears much more substantial with chunks of vegetables. Eleanor gently pats the boy's head, telling him to eat his meal, even if it's only half full. Looking delighted, the freckled child expresses his deep gratitude for the unexpected kindness shown to him. Looking humbled, the young boy bows deeply to pay his respects to the noble lady. Confirming he must be hungry, the blonde lady kindly urges the child to go ahead and eat. Watching him eat, she somberly reflects on the tragic decline of her home kingdom of Hartman. Looking annoyed, Brianna privately scoffs at the blonde lady for lowering herself to interact with beggars. Brianna prepares to depart, while Priest Gran offers a polite word of thanks for her hard work. Approaching the priest, Eleanor apologizes for leaving early, but he assures her she did a wonderful thing. Bidding him farewell, the blonde lady promises to return and the brown-haired man tells her to take care. Stepping into the carriage, Brianna complains about the mud while Eleanor follows silently behind her. Pausing, Eleanor's attention is caught by a sudden loud shout as someone calls out to her. Looking exhausted, the freckled boy rushes back to reach the noblewoman before she leaves the district. Opening his hand, the child presents a small, vibrant bouquet of purple flowers as a gift. Touched by the gesture, she thanks him and notes she has never seen flowers like these before. Looking curious, the blonde lady leans down to ask the kind-hearted young boy for his name. Looking shy but happy, the freckled child reveals that his name is Lennox. Stunned by the name, Eleanor flashes back to a masked man with sliver hair and blue eyes. Offering a bright smile, the blonde lady tells Lennox that it is a pleasure to meet him. Looking regal, the blonde Empress Dowager appears as the scene shifts back to the palace. Returning from their task, the two candidates stand before the Empress, their dresses stained with mud. Performing a graceful curtsy, the blonde candidate offers her sincere apologies to the Empress Dowager. Observing her closely, the Empress Dowager notes how the young lady's dedication to the work shows. While enjoying tea, the Empress asks the two ladies to describe their activities during the mission. Looking composed, Brianna explains to Her Majesty that their task involved distributing soup to the poor. Describing the situation, the red-haired lady notes the miserable and desperate state of the slum citizens. Looking thoughtful, the Empress considers the potential for riots if such aid was not provided. Looking skeptical, the blonde Eleanor observes Brianna's calculated and polished manner of reporting to the Empress. Brianna suggests increasing support and security to ensure order and prepare for potential riots in the slums. Looking cold, the red-haired lady reflects on how easily a starving population can turn into a mob. A sudden, light giggle sounds as a fellow noblewoman praises Brianna's sharp and exceptional judgment. Sitting nearby, a dark-haired lady silently records the details of the ongoing conversation in a notebook. Shifting her attention, the Empress Dowager asks for Eleanor's perspective on the day's difficult events. Looking confident, Brianna assumes that her comprehensive report has left the other lady with nothing to say. Looking resolute, the blonde princess starts to speak, but her words begin with a simple hesitation. Standing with newfound resolve, a powerful presence seems to emanate from the blonde princess of Hartman. Reacting with shock, Brianna looks on as Eleanor delivers a truly unexpected and bold declaration. Disturbed by the words, an unseen voice reflects on their initial opposition to the princess's position. Looking startled, the attending noblewomen react to the gravity of the statement Eleanor has just made. Looking intrigued, the Empress Dowager invites the young lady to elaborate on the reasons for her stance. Recounting her experience, Eleanor describes meeting a desperate child who had accidentally spilled his only meal. She explains how the boy sought help from others in the crowd to replenish his empty bowl. Looking grim, she reveals that despite the boy's efforts, his bowl ultimately remained nearly empty. Looking confused, the dark-haired lady questions the specific nature of the realization Eleanor mentioned. The blonde candidate explains that while soup eases hunger, poverty itself is a much deeper problem. Looking resolute, she asserts that the true burden of poverty is not something others can simply solve. Looking pensive, the Empress Dowager remains silent as she weighs the profound implications of Eleanor's words. The Empress Dowager asks the group what the impoverished citizens will do if they cut off support immediately. Looking intense, the blonde Eleanor begins to suggest an alternative solution instead of simply providing direct food aid. Looking focused, the blonde lady prepares to detail her counterproposal to improve the conditions within the city. The dark-haired lady asks for clarification about the slums while Eleanor describes the dire state of the housing. Describing the ruined district, Eleanor emphasizes that the crumbling houses must be rebuilt to provide proper shelter. She suggests employing the poor as laborers for the repairs in exchange for enough seeds and flour for a year. Eleanor explains that distributing abandoned fields for farming could create a sustainable system for a yearly harvest. Looking impressed, the Empress Dowager notes the brilliance of combining housing repairs with wheat farming for the poor. The Empress smiles warmly at the two candidates, thanking them for their hard work during the difficult mission. While the dark-haired lady records the meeting, the Empress Dowager remains silent and deep in thought. The Empress Dowager and her assistant share a meaningful glance as a sudden light rustle sounds nearby. Looking contemplative, the Empress privately notes that the blonde princess is far more intelligent than she had first anticipated. Looking into the distance, the dark-haired lady agrees with the Empress's assessment of Eleanor's exceptional capabilities. Looking downward, the Empress wonders why such a talented person would ever wish to leave her noble household. The assistant asks if the decision relates to Caroline, prompting the Empress to question the status of the investigation. Looking apologetic, the dark-haired lady informs the Empress that the investigation into Caroline will require more time. She asks if Her Majesty has any clues to help narrow the focus of the ongoing search for information. Looking serious, the Empress Dowager prepares to share a secret truth regarding the mysterious identity of Caroline. Close-up of her eye, the Empress begins to explain that Caroline was actually the previous Duke's second wife. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as the dark-haired lady reacts in total shock to the Empress's startling revelation. Delicate pink and purple flowers fill the scene, marking a peaceful transition to the palace's expansive gardens. High in the sunlit gardens, several ladies in waiting gather near the flower beds to enjoy the beautiful afternoon weather. A cheerful lady in a floral dress invites everyone to relax and fully enjoy themselves in the garden. A sudden light rustle sounds as Eleanor stops to observe a specific purple flower growing among the greenery. Looking at the bloom, she notes its striking similarity to the bouquet given to her by young Linnet. Approaching her, the red-haired Brianna asks what she is looking at, and Eleanor remarks on the flower's beauty. Brianna admits she has never seen this flower before and offers to ask the palace gardener for its name. A sudden, light rustle sounds as Brianna insists on checking the flower's origin despite Eleanor's polite refusal. A sudden, sharp exclamation sounds as a voice calls out for God's eternal protection over His Majesty. A man with silver hair and green eyes appears in the garden wearing an ornate blue uniform. Looking stunned, Eleanor stares at the Emperor and wonders if he could possibly be the boy named Lennox. The silver-haired Emperor walks past, leaving the blonde lady standing in a state of complete shock. Looking into his eyes, Eleanor continues to doubt the possibility of such a connection as the Emperor moves away. A sudden light gasp sounds as an attendant urges the blonde lady to follow the Empress Dowager immediately. A sudden heavy thud sounds as Eleanor performs a deep bow before the seated Emperor and Empress. A sudden, sharp swish sounds as the silver-haired Emperor sits down with a cold and detached demeanor. An attendant invites the Empress Dowager to sit beside the Emperor to begin the formal greeting of the candidates. The two rulers sit across from the noblewomen in the sunlit garden, surrounded by their silent attendants. Looking at the Emperor, Eleanor desperately tells herself that the resemblance to the boy must be a coincidence. A chibi-style Empress Dowager giggles, teasing the Emperor about having so much free time to visit the garden. Looking toward the ladies, the Emperor credits his capable subordinates for allowing him to take a moment of rest. Eleanor looks pale and visibly shaken by the Emperor's proximity and his mysterious and intense gaze. Noticing her distress, Brianna asks if the lady is all right, causing Eleanor to offer a startled and hurried response. Looking concerned, Brianna suggests informing the Emperor if she is unwell, but Eleanor insists she is perfectly fine. Eleanor resolves to keep her composure, reminding herself that she and the Emperor are complete strangers to one another. A sudden light rustle sounds as the Empress invites the Emperor to greet the newly selected ladies of the court. A sudden quick flutter sounds as the red-haired Brianna steps forward and gracefully introduces herself to His Majesty. A sudden light giggle sounds as the Emperor mentions he has heard very fond reports about Brianna's family. A sudden low groan sounds as the silver-haired Emperor looks toward the blonde lady with a chillingly intense expression. Surrounded by flowers, Eleanor looks down nervously, trying to maintain her poise under the Emperor's heavy gaze. Emperor Vlad sits in the garden, a thoughtful silence hanging over his intense and regal presence. The Empress Dowager praises the Duchess of Mecklen's recent work, noting her remarkable efforts lately. She explains sending Eleanor and Brianna to the Haddam slums, catching the Emperor's skeptical interest. Looking closer, the Empress highlights how Eleanor specifically provided proposals for solving the difficult slum problems. The silver-haired Emperor acknowledges that grasping such a complex situation so quickly is truly impressive. Addressing Eleanor, he asks about her adjustment to palace life, receiving a polite, steady response. Thinking privately, Eleanor finds the palace like heaven compared to her former life at House Mechlin. Lady Nora approaches the Emperor with a sudden, enthusiastic suggestion regarding activities for the festival period. Looking bright and hopeful, the brown-haired lady prepares to deliver her heartfelt request to His Majesty. Nora proposes a palace masquerade ball, leaving the Emperor momentarily taken aback by her bold idea. The Empress Dowager laughs, agreeing it sounds fun and insisting that the Emperor must participate too. A frantic attendant protests the extra work, but the Emperor's stern gaze quickly silences all opposition. Observing the group, the Emperor officially approves the masquerade ball, much to Lady Nora's delight. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Nora and another lady celebrate the exciting masquerade ball announcement. Shifting the mood, the Emperor focuses on a more serious matter concerning his family's hidden history. He informs his mother that he has prepared a special gift for her in private conversation. Looking intense, the silver-haired man leans in to share sensitive information about their ongoing secret investigation. Surrounded by guards, the rulers continue their heavy conversation within the sunlit palace gardens. Looking frustrated, the Empress Dowager finds the clues they have gathered so far too vague. The Emperor points out the remarkable progress they have made, which his mother eventually concedes. He assures her that Count Hilda is doing his absolute best to find the hidden truth. The Empress Dowager Empress demands full support for the Count to ensure the investigation continues completely unhindered. Looking grim, she reflects on the dark revelation that Empress Edia was actually murdered by assassination. Close-up of her eye, she declares that anyone insulting the imperial family will pay dearly. Shifting topics, the Empress Dowager suggests the Emperor consider remarriage once this matter is finally resolved. She argues that the throne requires an empress, but the Emperor reacts with cold, detached silence. Looking skeptical, he wonders what woman would ever truly want to marry a man like him. Looking downward, the silver-haired ruler seems weighed down by the past and his heavy royal duties. The Empress Dowager insists that a true empress must be educated to handle their difficult reality. The Emperor recalls Edia calling the imperial family a cursed den, a thought that still haunts. Looking shocked, the Empress Dowager questions his claim about Edia's bitter resentment toward the royal family. He wonders if Edia's death resulted from the very power struggle she had always deeply hated. Looking resolute, the Emperor remains focused on uncovering the harsh truth behind his family's history. A sudden light sigh sounds as the Empress prays the Crown Prince won't be hurt. The two rulers share a contemplative moment, the weight of their shared secrets hanging heavy. The Emperor finally agrees to consider a successor for his mother's position as the Empress. The scene shifts back to the gardens, where the royal guards stand in silent, vigilant formation. Looking pensive, Eleanor watches the rulers, her mind clearly occupied by her own growing suspicions. Returning to her room, the blonde princess stands by the window, lost in quiet and intense thought. She appreciates the quiet time while the Empress Dowager is away on a hot spring trip. Looking troubled, she tries to reconcile the pieces of the mystery surrounding the young boy's name. A sudden light rustle sounds as Eleanor realizes that something about the situation feels fundamentally wrong. A regal portrait of Emperor Vlad Wendt von Benello-Baden appears, confirming his official imperial identity. Eleanor reflects on how the name Lennox is nowhere to be found in his full name. She wonders if the man she met was using an alias to hide his true identity. She notes how naturally both the boy and Edgar use that name despite the clear discrepancy. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as someone enters the room, catching Eleanor completely off guard. Looking apologetic, Lady Nora enters and offers a sincere apology for startling the blonde lady. Recognizing her visitor, Eleanor welcomes Lady Nora into her room with a surprised and curious expression. Admitting she was lost in thought, Eleanor asks Nora what brings her here this beautiful afternoon. The brown-haired Nora asks the blonde lady if she would like to have some tea. Nora invites the lady to her room and asks if she will join her. Looking surprised, Eleanor asks Nora for clarification on her sudden and unexpected tea invitation. A bold title card marks the transition as the scene shifts toward the palace gardens. Steaming cups of freshly brewed tea sit neatly arranged on an elegant floral-patterned tablecloth. The scene transitions to the lush, sun-drenched gardens of the imperial palace under a bright sky. Seated at the table, Nora points out that His Majesty's garden is visible from their spot. Eleanor acknowledges the view, while Nora calls this garden location her absolute favorite spot. Nora asks Eleanor about her tea preference and recommends the clean taste of Ronline tea. She mentions an amazing tea blender who has just opened a new shop in the city. Nora explains that the tea they're about to enjoy comes from that specific new shop. Eleanor decides to try that one, prompting Nora to praise her for making an excellent choice. The two ladies enjoy their tea time together within the peaceful sunlit palace garden gazebo. Nora admits her desire for this tea time, while Eleanor asks if she really meant her. Nora praises Eleanor's impressive performance during the Lady-in-Waiting interview, noting how much it stood out. Eleanor blushes as she recalls kneeling and vowing to be the Empress Dowager's servant. A chibi-style Nora compares Eleanor to a swordless knight, expressing how moved she was. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Nora mentions hearing many bad rumors about the blonde lady. Nora panics over her slip of the tongue while Eleanor thinks she is cute and wonders if she was ever like that. Fidgeting nervously, Nora offers a sincere apology, insisting she had no ill intentions with her words. Eleanor accepts the apology, but prepares to ask Nora a very serious and pointed question. A sudden light rustle sounds as Eleanor asks Nora to reveal the rumors circulating about her. Hesitating, Nora listens as Eleanor clarifies she isn't looking for an argument about their truth. The brown-haired lady looks toward the blonde lady, waiting for her to continue the explanation. Looking serious, Eleanor explains that her goal in asking is simply to change the future. Looking confused, Nora asks what old rumors could possibly have to do with the lady's future. Eleanor states she needs the information to understand how she should change moving forward. Nora hums thoughtfully, considering the request while gazing off into the distance at the garden. Eleanor asks for total secrecy regarding their conversation, and Nora quickly agrees to remain silent. Nora reveals she heard from Cordelia Kazakh that the princess caused the fall of Harmon. The rumors claim Eleanor's extreme extravagance and vanity caused her people to starve to death. Nora adds the source found her name disgusting and hated seeing such a princess strutting around Baden so arrogantly. Eleanor realizes the rumors began before her marriage, catching her in a moment of deep shock. A close-up of Eleanor's mouth reveals her grim determination as she processes the cruel rumors. Eleanor wonders who spread such malicious lies and suspects the mysterious woman named Caroline. A dark, ghostly image of an older woman looms behind the blonde lady as she thinks. Eleanor dismisses Caroline as a suspect because marriage talk with Ernst had not started back then. A sudden light rustle sounds as Nora asks if the blonde lady is feeling truly all right. Eleanor thanks Nora for her honesty while Nora apologizes for judging her based solely on rumors. Looking hopeful, Nora asks if they could share more tea times together in the future. Eleanor worries about causing trouble, but Nora insists she likes her and doesn't care. A sudden quick flutter sounds as a hand prepares to make a friendly pinky promise. Nora enthusiastically declares this the first day of their official friendship while looking toward Eleanor. Nora asks for her thoughts while Eleanor finds this new side of her quite unexpected. Looking genuinely happy, Eleanor offers a warm and sincere smile to her new friend. Walking through the palace, Eleanor wonders who could be behind such persistent and false slander. Looking pensive, she resolves to take time and sort out her thoughts regarding Lennox's current situation. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as a man wearing an ornate blue and purple uniform appears. A man with brown hair and purple eyes looks at Eleanor with a very intense gaze. Close-up of a striking purple eye capturing the mysterious man's focused and piercing observation. Eleanor tells the brown-haired man she's on her way back to her quarters after tea. The brown-haired man says he will get going then, walking past the blonde lady. Eleanor's feet make a rhythmic sound as she walks briskly across the marble floor. A sudden, heavy sound echoes as the brown-haired man's boots step firmly behind her. Eleanor stops and lets out an annoyed tisk sound, her eyes closed in frustration. She turns around sharply, looking surprised that the man is still following her closely. He explains they are heading the same way toward the Empress Dowager's palace garden. He claims he has business there, causing Eleanor to let out a frustrated sigh. Eleanor decides it's best to say nothing more and shakes her head in annoyance. The two continue walking through the sunlit corridor together in a tense, silent atmosphere. He commands her to walk closely beside him, leaving her momentarily stunned by his request. When she questions him, he explains it is simply to match their walking pace. A sharp grinding sound occurs as Eleanor clenches her jaw in visible mounting irritation. Eleanor suddenly dashes away, her footsteps making a quick rhythmic sound on the garden path. She turns back and questions why she should even listen to his strange demands. He smirks, wondering if her behavior is revenge for how he addressed her previously. He dismisses her actions as childish while reaching out a hand toward the blonde lady. He suddenly grabs her shoulder, causing her to gasp in surprise at his bold move. A heavy, chilling sound resonates as the atmosphere becomes incredibly tense between the two. He warns her to stop acting recklessly within the dangerous environment of the palace. She retorts that she wouldn't be there if she were easily frightened by such threats. Looking resolute, Eleanor stares at the man with a defiant and unwavering gaze. He sighs and tells her to take care as she turns and walks away. Eleanor departs quickly, her blonde hair and dress visible as she leaves the garden area. From a high window, a hand rests against the glass while watching her walk away. Looking pensive, the silver-haired man watches Eleanor through the window with a thoughtful expression. Edgar asks the man what he has been staring at so intently this entire time. The silver-haired man urgently calls out for Edgar to pay attention to his words. Looking intense, the silver-haired man focuses his green eyes on a new secret objective. The scene shifts to a bustling dressing room filled with various ladies and busy maids. Eleanor gazes into the mirror, privately thinking that she is not interested in such vanity. A sudden quick sound echoes as Nora holds up a gold dress for her appraisal. Looking delighted, Nora praises the dress and calls it incredibly cute for the blonde lady. Nora asks Eleanor if she would like to have another dress similar to that one. A series of cute chibi images shows Nora enthusiastically offering many different dresses to Eleanor. Nora makes a tisk-tisk sound, playfully teasing that the lady has very poor fashion taste. The red-haired Brianna enters with a box, asking Nora to clarify what she just said. A quick clicking sound follows as Brianna opens a large wooden box for the group. A sudden, shimmering sound occurs as a hand reveals a beautiful blue and white gown. Brianna highlights the subtle gold detailing on the chest as the dress's most impressive feature. Eleanor looks completely taken aback and confused by the sudden presentation of the dress. Brianna holds the gown out firmly, her expression serious as she waits for a response. Brianna questions if she will refuse the gift, and Eleanor quickly agrees to accept it. Brianna offers a warm smile, stating that the blue dress suits the blonde lady perfectly. Brianna insists that she should just wear it, waving her hand in a dismissive gesture. Eleanor wonders why the red-haired lady is suddenly acting with such unexpected and strange kindness. Nora whispers to Eleanor, encouraging her to wear the dress confidently in front of Brianna. Eleanor decides it's not a bad idea since she lacks other suitable clothes to wear. A sudden firm sound echoes as a polished black shoe steps onto the pattern rug. A formal greeting sounds, welcoming a royal figure after a long period of time. Edgar looks up with a start, his purple eyes wide with sudden realization. A rhythmic walking sound echoes as Edgar enters the room, drawing an inquiry about his presence. Edgar offers a respectful bow as a polite sound follows, apologizing to the Empress Dowager for his absence. Standing elegantly in her blue gown, the Empress Dowager begins to address him with a knowing smile. Edgar shifts his attention towards someone across the room as a sudden, sharp gasp sounds. Eleanor looks on in complete surprise, her blue eyes wide as she observes the newcomer. Eleanor holds a blue fabric against her purple dress while standing amongst beautiful white flowers. Disturbed by the intense attention, Eleanor wonders to herself why Edgar is staring so intently at her. Edgar stands before Eleanor, causing her to look back at him with an expression of mild concern. The Empress Dowager tilts her head as a curious sound occurs, wondering about the purpose of his visit. Startled out of his trance, Edgar quickly confirms his presence to the Empress Dowager with a nervous exclamation. Edgar explains he has information for her and wishes to pay respects, prompting her to invite him to continue. A light, nervous cough sounds as Edgar prepares to explain the details of the upcoming royal event. Edgar describes the banquet attendance and the ceremonial cake cutting while the scene of the party looms behind him. The Empress Dowager lets out a confused sound, clearly surprised by the unexpected details Edgar is providing. Shocked by his report, the Empress Dowager reacts with visible alarm as a sudden sharp gasp sounds. The Empress Dowager giggles at the absurdity, suggesting the Emperor sent Edgar as a flimsy excuse for surveillance. A chibi-style Empress Dowager teases that the Emperor is merely using the errand to check on her. Edgar trembles nervously, admitting he would actually be happy if the Emperor truly cared about the errand's outcome. The conversation shifts as it is mentioned that the ladies-in-waiting were busy selecting their formal dresses. Edgar turns toward Eleanor as a quick rustle sounds, catching her off guard with his sudden focus. The Empress Dowager dismisses Edgar to attend to his duties while a golden chandelier glimmers overhead. A rhythmic walking sound follows as Edgar approaches Eleanor, who is busy sorting through various colorful fabrics. Edgar holds up a vibrant pink dress for Eleanor's inspection, causing her to react with total shock. Confused by his unsolicited fashion advice, Eleanor asks Edgar why he is questioning her about the dresses. Eleanor looks back at him as a soft rustle sounds, waiting for an explanation for his behavior. Blushing deeply, Edgar admits he was simply wondering if he could be of any assistance to her. Eleanor stares at him in stunned silence, leaving Edgar to wait awkwardly for some kind of response. Eleanor states she has already chosen her outfits, but Edgar persists by asking about her accessories. Eleanor insists on handling the details herself while Edgar offers to summon a professional designer for her. Edgar smiles warmly, suggesting a designer would have better taste and could provide more meaningful assistance. A passionate exclamation about his sincerity rings out against a backdrop of intense flickering flames. At chibi-style, Edgar argues fervently with a confused Eleanor as a low rumbling sound of frustration echoes. Nora stifles a laugh behind her hands, finding the awkward interaction between the two incredibly amusing. Nora whispers to Brianna, wondering if Baron Edgar has developed feelings for the blonde lady. The Empress Dowager and her attendant look on in disbelief, questioning Edgar's unusually proactive and bold behavior. Close-up of Edgar's blushing face as he feels the weight of everyone's eyes on his embarrassing display. A loud, heavy thud sounds as Edgar storms out of the room, feeling thoroughly humiliated by the encounter. Seated at his desk, the silver-haired emperor waits calmly for Edgar to deliver his report.
Edgar rants about never repeating the task while the emperor calmly instructs him to sit down.
A heavy, tired plop sounds as Edgar collapses into a chair, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. A sudden, firm thud sounds as the silver-haired man places a comforting hand on Edgar's tense shoulder. Edgar questions if a simple shoulder rub can fix his problems while the Emperor continues the gesture. A chibi Emperor cheekily asks if Edgar would prefer a head massage instead of a shoulder rub. Information is presented confirming that the blonde lady has officially selected a total of 5 dresses. Edgar lets out a weary, long sigh, looking completely drained by the events of the afternoon. The Emperor notes that Eleanor intends to attend all 5 days of the upcoming Thanksgiving festival. Close-up of the Emperor's striking green eye as he considers the mystery of the masquerade ball gown. The Emperor asks Edgar to draw the dresses while Edgar looks back with an expression of annoyance. A scratching sound follows as Edgar begins drawing the dresses, letting out one final frustrated sigh. The silver-haired Emperor leans over Edgar's shoulder as the purple-haired man continues his sketches. Eleanor walks through the garden, hoping her quick departure helps her avoid a run-in with Linnock. Eleanor privately questions why just thinking of him makes her heart race as if she committed crimes. A sudden rhythmic thump sounds as Eleanor looks forward with wide, startled eyes and a pale face. A voice calls out, asking where she is headed, causing a shocked exclamation to escape Eleanor's lips. Clad in a regal blue suit, the silver-haired Linnock offers a faint, gentle smile to the lady. Eleanor stands frozen as she faces the Emperor amidst the shimmering light of the palace garden path. Eleanor wonders why he always startles her, while Linnock offers a sincere apology for scaring her. Eleanor quickly raises her hands and insists she is fine while Linnock watches her with calm eyes. Linnock notes her recent busy schedule, admitting he grew curious when she was absent from the Western Palace. Eleanor offers a formal apology to the Emperor, boldly asking if she may proceed ahead of him. Eleanor explains that she must report the results of a task personally assigned by the Empress Dowager. Linnock remains silent, his expression unreadable as he stares intently at the blonde lady standing before him. Linnock suggests they walk together since he has business there, but Eleanor quickly offers another polite apology. A tense silence follows as Eleanor looks down, avoiding the Emperor's gaze during their awkward garden encounter. Eleanor looks up at him with a curious expression, wondering if there is a specific reason for his assumption. Linnock asks why she is avoiding him, prompting Eleanor to clarify she is simply showing him proper respect. Eleanor maintains her composure, thinking to herself that she has no reason to hold any private meetings. Linnock recoils slightly in surprise, a bead of sweat forming as he reacts to her blunt statement. Linnock begins to speak, his green eyes filled with a soft, lingering regret as he trails off. Eleanor insists on her formal title as Duchess of Mechlin, causing Linnock to bow his head respectfully. A metallic sound echoes as Linnock holds out an ornate gold key, confirming he understands her position. Linnock offers the key to Eleanor, encouraging her to use it whenever she wishes to take walks. Eleanor clenches her jaw, wondering if he still remembers their childhood promise regarding a secret garden base. Eleanor resolutely decides that she will never set foot in the East Palace garden ever again. Standing back to back, the two remain separated by an invisible wall of cold rain and lingering emotional distance. A soft, airy whisper calls out to the Emperor as purple leaves frame the bright, open sky. Looking melancholic, Eleanor stares off into the distance as golden light illuminates her short blonde hair. Clasping her hands together, Eleanor silently pleads for him to stop showing her any more misplaced kindness. Brilliant blue fireworks explode over the Grand Palace as a loud, rhythmic boom echoes through the night. A golden candelabra with 3 lit candles stands before a backdrop of elegant, decorative palace wall carvings. The grand ballroom is filled with the low hum of conversation as noble guests gather for festivities. A brown-haired man compliments the Empress Dowager's youthful appearance, prompting a flattered laugh from the lady. In a cute chibi style, the Empress Dowager giggles while the brown-haired man continues his charming flattery. The Empress Dowager is surprised by news concerning the youngest princess of the distant Bahama Kingdom. The brown-haired man thanks the Empress Dowager as she offers her congratulations regarding the recent, exciting news. Eleanor watches from a distance as the brown-haired man confirms his attendance with a cheerful, confident declaration. A sudden realization strikes Eleanor as she looks toward the man with a wide, shocked expression. Eleanor greets the prince, noting the time passed, while he expresses surprise at their unexpected meeting. The brown-haired prince observes that she cut her hair, and Eleanor confirms that is how it happened. Eleanor looks down with a somber expression, her long earrings shimmering as she remains lost in thought. The prince asks if he can send a wedding invitation, causing Eleanor to recoil in sudden shock. The brown-haired prince explains that he is currently fulfilling his duties while working directly under Her Majesty. Eleanor stares at him, her blue eyes wide as she processes the weight of his unexpected news. Looking deeply disturbed, the brown-haired prince covers his mouth as a low, worried sound escapes him. The Empress Dowager calls out to Eleanor, prompting a quick and responsible response from the blonde lady. The Empress Dowager suggests they go together since the Crown Prince extended such a kind, formal invitation. The scene shifts to the ornate palace interior as the Empress Dowager asks if it is time. The prince asks for the honor of escorting her, prompting her to tease him about his shamelessness. A firm footstep echoes as the brown-haired prince credits his bold behavior to his brother, Wind. The ballroom is filled with noble guests as festivities begin under the Grand Palace lights. Eleanor reflects on how the name Linnock is a secret known only to her, despite his official name. The mystery of his childhood nickname lingers as delicate lace patterns frame her deep internal questioning. Lennox stands with a stoic expression, his striking green eyes reflecting the weight of his imperial responsibilities. A low hum of excitement spreads through the crowd as guests eagerly await the royal procession. A booming announcement echoes through the grand hall, signaling that the Empress Dowager has officially arrived. Clad in her royal red gown, the Empress Dowager enters accompanied by her son and personal attendants. The guests erupt in a unified cheer, wishing long life to Her Majesty as she passes by. Eleanor scans the crowded room with a worried gaze, wondering why she cannot find Caroline anywhere. Brianna leans in close and whispers, asking Eleanor if she recognizes the man standing alone across the room. A look of confusion crosses Eleanor's face as she attempts to identify the blonde man in the crowd. Eleanor's heart sinks as a sudden shock takes hold, her eyes widening at the sight of her brother. She identifies him as Adler, her only living relative and a former member of the Hartman royal family. Fury boils within Eleanor as she questions how he could possibly dare to show his face here. Adler makes a hasty retreat, prompting Eleanor to think that running away is his only natural choice. The triumphant sound of trumpets suddenly blares through the hall, catching Eleanor off guard as she looks up. A grand banner announces the arrival of the Emperor of Baden as he stands in his regal finery. Lennox offers a formal bow before catching Eleanor's eye, a silent and tense moment passing between them. A firm rhythmic footstep sounds as the Emperor walks toward his throne, his presence commanding absolute silence. Soft, secretive whispers fill the air as the noble guests discuss the Emperor's grand entrance behind their fans. Seated on his throne, Lennox promises to keep his opening remarks brief so everyone can enjoy the festival. An enthusiastic noble exclaims that the young emperor truly carries himself with a different, more modern grace. Rhythmic claps sound as the crowd cheers for His Majesty, celebrating the prosperity of the Baden Empire. An elegant violin melody begins to play, setting a romantic and festive tone for the grand ballroom dance. Couples take to the floor, swaying gracefully as music notes drift through the shimmering light of the hall. Eleanor remains standing alone at the edge of the ballroom, looking contemplative while the others enjoy themselves. Nora approaches with a glass of wine, asking Eleanor if she has any intention of joining the dance. Nora suggests they rest together, while Eleanor notes that the Baron seems equally uninterested in the dancing. Nora admits her lack of interest in social events, prompting Eleanor to recall that Nora is tone-deaf. As they watch the crowd, Nora wonders who the Emperor will choose as his first dance partner. Nora notes that many young ladies are already lining up, hoping for a dance with the seated Emperor. The ballroom floor becomes a blur of motion as the guests continue their rhythmic and graceful movements. A sharp, focused gaze from Lennox's green eye cuts through the crowd, searching for someone specific. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor flinches, feeling the weight of a gaze she cannot ignore. Eleanor attempts to stay calm, but her thoughts are interrupted as a man suddenly offers her a greeting. Introducing himself as Child von Juster, the purple-haired man asks if he may have the honor of a dance. Eleanor freezes in shock, recognizing him as a notorious playboy, while Nora watches the encounter with deep suspicion. From his throne, Lennox reacts with visible surprise as he spots the man approaching the blonde lady. Eleanor grows anxious, wondering why the Emperor is suddenly making his way across the ballroom toward them. Child von Juster suggests they move to the terrace for a chat, noticing her reluctance to join the dance. A quick tap sounds as Child takes her arm and Eleanor agrees to leave just as Lennox arrives. The purple-haired man laughs, thanking her for the honor, while Eleanor maintains a cold, distant expression. Lennox watches from a distance, wondering why Eleanor is going to such lengths to avoid him. The two stand on the quiet balcony, the cool night air providing a stark contrast to the ballroom. Looking smug, Child von Juster thinks to himself that successfully approaching her was easier than he expected. A metallic clinking sounds as a bag of gold is offered to settle his gambling debts in exchange. A mysterious hooded figure holds the heavy bag, having promised to clear the playboy's debts for this task. Child von Juster is determined not to pass up such a lucrative opportunity to fix his financial ruin. They stand together on the balcony, Eleanor sipping her drink while her escort hides his true greedy intentions. Eleanor casts a worried look back, silently wondering if the Emperor is angry about her sudden departure. Child von Juster asks Eleanor if she likes Galleon's poetry, prompting her to ask for clarification. Child mentions his fondness for the poem Lovers of 100 Days and offers a recital. The purple-haired man wonders if she already fell for him while Eleanor stares at him blankly. In a chibi style, Eleanor announces her departure, leaving the man shocked by her sudden exit. Eleanor insists she is tired as the man tries to persuade her to stay a bit longer. A rhythmic click-clack sounds as Eleanor walks away while the man asks to meet again soon. Child von Juster looks rejected and sweats nervously, wondering if he is truly that unappealing to her. A soft creak echoes as Eleanor opens a door and steps into the ornate palace room. Eleanor asks if the Empress Dowager called for her, and the older woman invites her inside immediately. A polite bow sounds as two maids greet Eleanor with their heads lowered in synchronized fashion. The Empress Dowager reveals that Eleanor's brother has arrived, causing the blonde lady to gasp in shock. Looking directly at her, the Empress Dowager asks if Eleanor knows the reason for her brother's visit. Eleanor explains she lost contact with him, thinking to herself that Adler was the one who vanished. Eleanor is stunned to hear that Count Adler requested a private audience with the Emperor himself. The Empress Dowager decides that she will meet with Adler in place of the Emperor instead. A focused look crosses the Empress Dowager's face as she resolves to uncover the reason for his visit. The blonde Empress Dowager asks Eleanor if she would like to join the meeting to see her brother. Eleanor looks away with a bitter expression, calling her brother a self-centered and uncaring person. Eleanor adds that he is also a cowardly, calculative germaphobe who only cares for his own skin. Radiant light surrounds Eleanor as she firmly declares that she has no desire to meet him personally. The room falls into a heavy silence as the Empress Dowager observes Eleanor's unwavering and cold resolve. A weary sigh escapes the Empress Dowager as she accepts that nothing more can be done. Eleanor recalls how Adler abandoned her after stealing the royal family's wealth, disowning him as her brother. A somber thought reflects on her past as a princess who once dreamed within her own country. The Empress Dowager looks at Eleanor with pity, noting how regrettable the situation is for royalty. Eleanor sits alone in a sun-drenched room, diligently reviewing stacks of documents on the table. A tired phew escapes Eleanor as she wonders why her brother requested an audience with His Majesty. A sudden cheerful call interrupts her thoughts, causing Eleanor to look up with a startled expression. Brianna enters the room with a thud, complaining about the endless pile of documents waiting for them. Eleanor smiles softly, noting that the document load today is actually much lighter than it usually is. Brianna asks what Eleanor finds so fascinating about the document tasks the Empress Dowager assigns to them. Brianna notes that despite the Empress's praise for her, important document reviews are only entrusted to Eleanor. Eleanor suggests that perhaps other tasks suit Brianna better, prompting a thoughtful hum from her friend. A sudden grab sounds as Brianna takes Eleanor's hands and prepares to ask her for a favor. Brianna asks Eleanor if she would like to leave the palace and accompany her today instead. Brianna smiles brightly, mentioning that her mother is preparing a wonderful dinner for them to enjoy tonight. Delicate pale pink leaves frame a bright white space, signaling a quiet and peaceful transition in time. Golden light bathes a modest, elegant house as the sun begins to set over the lush trees. The door swings open with a wide gesture as a young man named Hans greets them excitedly. Brianna and Eleanor arrive at the gate, where Brianna offers a cheerful greeting to young Hans. Brianna asks about her mother's whereabouts, and Hans confirms that she is currently waiting for them inside. Brianna leads the way toward the house while Eleanor follows behind, looking slightly surprised by the modesty. Eleanor reflects on the contrast between the grand Mechlin house and the surprisingly modest home of Hilda. A distinct click-clack sounds as a pair of purple shoes steps gracefully across the polished wooden floor. An elegant woman in a lavender gown makes her entrance, her presence radiating warm maternal grace. Brianna rushes forward with a joyful shout and pulls her mother into a tight, affectionate hug. Brianna tells Eleanor that her mother has always been incredibly kind to her throughout her life. Grace von Hilda introduces herself politely, and Eleanor responds with a formal bow and her own introduction. Grace invites them to the dining room, and Eleanor thanks her warmly for the kind, formal invitation. A shimmering glow illuminates a lavish dinner spread featuring lobster, pasta, soup, and fresh appetizers. Eleanor marvels at the heart and care put into the dinner prepared specially for her. Clasped hands and a radiant smile show Eleanor's genuine delight at the gourmet meal. A soft click sounds as Eleanor enters her room, looking a bit tired and startled. A heavy flop sounds as Eleanor collapses onto her bed, exhausted from the day's events. A weary sigh escapes as Eleanor reflects on the mental exhaustion of speaking with Her Majesty. A sudden thud sounds as Nora bursts in, announcing it is time for the masquerade. Eleanor admits her fatigue, but Nora insists she wear the turquoise dress gifted by Lady Brianna. Nora urges Eleanor to hurry, mentioning that the Empress Dowager is also currently preparing herself. Shimmering light bathes the Grand Palace exterior as the afternoon sun glints off its white walls. Eleanor stands elegantly in a turquoise lace gown, her face hidden behind a delicate butterfly mask. Nora and the Empress Dowager react with breathless wonder at Eleanor's stunning and sophisticated transformation. Looking at the blonde lady, the Empress Dowager exclaims that she looks absolutely stunning today. Eleanor offers a polite bow, expressing how truly honored she is by the Empress's high praise. A quick snap sounds as Nora adjusts her mask, wishing everyone a wonderful and enjoyable time. A polite step sounds as the group notes Berenice's absence from the evening's highly anticipated festivities. Thoughts drift to Lady Brianna's absence, as they wish she could see Eleanor and her gift. The Empress Dowager reminds Eleanor of her promise to share the evening's very first dance together. A soft smile appears as Eleanor observes the affectionate mother-daughter bond between Nora and the Empress. Eleanor's eye widens behind her mask as a sudden realization or presence catches her off guard. A low, rhythmic mumble fills the background as guests begin to gather for the masquerade event. Eleanor's breath hitches in a silent gasp as she realizes something unexpected about the ballroom's layout. Eleanor notes the outdoor venue while Nora laughs, praising the splendid and glowing atmosphere of the festival. Using aliases, Nora playfully asks the Empress Dowager for a dance, and she happily agrees. Eleanor finds their use of aliases amusingly clever as a pair of hands reaches toward her. A somber thought reflects on why Berenice might have chosen to skip this particular masquerade ball. A soft chuckle sounds as Eleanor hides her mouth, finding the secret identities of her friends charming. A man's footsteps sound as he approaches Eleanor, asking if she is enjoying the festive evening. Eleanor flinches in surprise as she recognizes Lennox despite the elaborate mask hiding his handsome face. A warm grin spreads across Lennox's face as he gazes at Eleanor with clear and focused intensity. Lennox asks if she is enjoying the ball, and Eleanor confirms she is having a wonderful time. A startled gasp sounds as Lennox asks for a dance, prompting Eleanor to claim her dancing skills. Musical notes drift through the air as Eleanor glances toward the crowded and rhythmic dance floor. Elegant couples sway gracefully under the moonlight, their movements blurred by the festive energy of the ball. The Empress Dowager and Nora dance together joyfully, fully embracing the playful spirit of the masquerade. A floating thought observes that the Emperor and Eleanor truly look like a perfect match together. A firm grab sounds as Lennox takes Eleanor's hand, calling her name to get her full attention. Lennox asks if she would help him just this once, leaving Eleanor speechless and visibly surprised. Lennox claims that no one wants to dance with him, much to Eleanor's internal confusion and disbelief. Narrated text notes that many beautiful young ladies were actually lining up to dance with His Majesty. In a chibi style, Eleanor finds his claim impossible to believe, wondering why he is lying. A smooth slide sounds as Lennox leans in closer, his gaze remaining fixed and pleading on Eleanor. Lennox admits he felt anxious that Child Von Jester might have been her very first dance partner. A quick nod sounds as Eleanor accepts the invitation, feeling she has no other choice but to agree. Lennox beams while thanking her, while Eleanor silently wonders what the Emperor truly wants from her. A gentle slide sounds as Lennox places his hand on Eleanor's waist, preparing to lead the dance. Lennox asks if they shall begin, and Eleanor remains silent as they prepare to move together. A rhythmic step sounds as Lennox's boot hits the ground, signaling the start of their graceful movement. The pair begins to sway gracefully, music notes fluttering around them as they find their rhythmic flow. Lennox compliments her dancing skills, noting they are quite impressive for someone who claimed to be poor. Eleanor returns the compliment while thinking of her past life's harsh training under the cruel Lady Caroline. Lennox leans in while dancing, asking if he might make a single special request of Eleanor. Lennox emphasizes that if she ever requires help, he genuinely wants to do his absolute best. Lennox asks if she could share even trivial matters, leaving Eleanor speechless and visibly stunned behind her mask. A focused shot on Eleanor's jeweled necklace as she decides to finally speak with complete and honest truth. Eleanor's inner thoughts reveal her deep-seated refusal to ever be married off into the Mechlin ducal family. While swaying together, Eleanor admits she does not believe the current situation is entirely the Emperor's fault. Resentment builds in Eleanor as she reflects on unavoidable political marriages and why she had to come to Baden. Lennox admits he truly hoped for her happiness, a sentiment that causes Eleanor's eyes to widen in shock. A floating thought bubble notes that the decision made was the best possible choice at that specific time. A close-up reveals Lennox's focused, intense gaze peering through the intricate patterns of his dark masquerade mask. The pair continues their elegant dance, moving in perfect harmony under the soft, ambient light of the ballroom. Eleanor looks directly at him, firmly stating her lack of happiness despite his wishes, which visibly affects Lennox. A wide perspective shows the couples on the floor, the rhythmic movement of the dance coming to a close. Cheerful guests in the background celebrate the festive atmosphere with bright smiles and animated conversation during the masquerade. Eleanor and Lennox complete their dance with a formal, respectful bow as they prepare to part ways. Back in her quiet chambers, Eleanor sits upright in bed, appearing deeply troubled by the evening's emotional revelations. A lingering image of Lennox stays in her mind, his masked face haunting her as she processes their conversation. Stepping onto the floor, Eleanor resolves to stop overthinking the night's events and focus on her immediate work. A sudden realization hits Eleanor as she approaches her vanity and notices something unusual about her blue dress. A dramatic close-up reveals a clean, deliberate cut slashing through the beautiful fabric of the gifted turquoise gown. Eleanor holds the ruined material, her face paling as she wonders when and how the dress was damaged. A sense of unease settles in as Eleanor decides she must keep the damaged dress safe for evidence. Eleanor clutches the blue fabric to her chest, her expression darkening with suspicion regarding who would sabotage her. Wearing a new floral patterned dress, Eleanor walks through the sunlit garden, her mind heavy with conflicting royal thoughts. A sudden presence behind her causes Eleanor to stop in her tracks with a sharp, startled intake of breath. Eleanor turns to find the blonde man standing there, calling out to him as her own estranged brother. Adeller asks with a soft, concerned expression if his sister has been eating properly since they last met. Eleanor looks away coldly as her brother claims he was deeply worried about her well-being all this time. Adler offers a weak smile, expressing relief that she looks well, though Eleanor remains skeptical of his intentions. Adler explains that he sent numerous letters that were always returned, causing him a great deal of concern. Adeller asks if the Empress Dowager treats her well, noting she looks the same as long ago. Eleanor confirms the Empress's kindness, pointedly contrasting her with others, which causes her brother to visibly flinch. Adler notes that she seems to be adapting well and offers his assistance if she needs anything at all. Eleanor rejects his offer with a blunt and icy refusal, leaving her brother looking awkward and uncomfortable. Adler tries to justify his past actions, claiming his naturalization in Bahama was an unavoidable choice for survival. Adler asks if she understands his efforts for their country and the agony of signing the clause. Bursting with pent-up rage, Eleanor demands to know why he didn't simply pass the throne to her instead. Eleanor points out that she, as the other heir, could have taken the burden of the throne. Eleanor stands firm, her eyes blazing with the fire of a princess who felt betrayed by her own kin. Adler claims he couldn't burden his sister, which Eleanor dismisses as a cowardly and pretty excuse. Eleanor accuses him of being too greedy to give up his power, yet too afraid to actually keep it. With a sharp look, Eleanor accuses her brother of handing their entire country over to a foreign nation instead. Losing his composure, Adler shouts his sister's name and asks if her words aren't being far too harsh. Adler argues that the nobility were selfish and that the royal family had lost all the people's trust. He explains the dire situation where rebellions were everywhere and the army was completely unable to be deployed. Adler poses a challenging question, asking what Eleanor could have possibly done differently in such a catastrophic situation. Eleanor speaks with quiet, chilling resolve, stating that at the very least she would not have run away. Eleanor continues her verbal assault, declaring she never would have surrendered the country without putting up a fight. Radiant light frames Eleanor as she invokes her pride as royalty, standing tall against her brother's pathetic excuses. The blonde man stands completely stunned and silenced by the weight of Eleanor's fierce and unwavering royal conviction. Adler dismisses Eleanor's royal convictions, cruelly suggesting she would have simply died without his interference. Eleanor stares at him, her eyes wide as she processes her brother's cold and dismissive attitude. A focused thought bubble notes that her removal was hidden under the dishonest pretext of marriage. Adler argues that she would have long ago perished from the commoner's stoning in their home country. Eleanor acknowledges his point with a bitter smile, noting she is alive but only because her persecutors changed. Tears well up as Eleanor declares that her life remains a cycle of misery despite surviving. Adler stands stunned as his sister reveals that the nobles of Baden have replaced her previous tormentors. Eleanor details her suffering, describing how she was insulted daily, slapped, and her hair cruelly cut. Silent tears fall as Eleanor recounts being trampled and wounded without receiving any proper medical treatment. Adler stammers in shock, revealing he truly believed she was living comfortably as a high-ranking noble. A sharp command sounds as Eleanor turns away, warning him against causing any more trouble in Baden. Eleanor vows to personally stop him if necessary, leaving Adler to stutter her name in helpless disbelief. Eleanor stands with unwavering resolve, her expression cold as she draws a firm line against her brother. A quick swirl sounds as Eleanor walks away, issuing a final warning to leave after the festival. From behind a pillar, the dark-haired emperor watches Adler stand alone and defeated in the garden. Bathed in a haunting blue light, Eleanor's pained expression reflects the deep emotional toll of the confrontation. A sharp clench sounds as Lennox's jaw tightens, his hidden presence radiating a protective and dangerous energy. Lennox's eyes burn with a chilling purple intensity as he demands to know who dared hurt her. The scene shifts to the Empress Dowager, who calmly enjoys a cup of tea in her chambers. Eleanor requests a private audience, standing before the Empress in a sunlit, grandly decorated drawing room. Eleanor admits she needs more power to handle Lady Caroline and investigate the previous Duke's first wife. A heavy gulp sounds as Eleanor waits for the Empress to respond to her bold political request. Eleanor speaks with quiet intensity, her profile framed by the light as she outlines her ambitious plan. The Empress Dowager looks startled, clearly taken aback by the young lady's sudden desire for political influence. Eleanor offers a bright, pleading smile, hoping her request for a debutante ball will be granted. The two women face each other in the quiet room as the Empress considers the girl's request. A questioning thought wonders why Eleanor would want a debutante ball after already appearing at the festival. The Empress observes Eleanor closely, searching for the true intent behind this unusual and public demand. The Empress Dowager asks if building social connections is her goal, and Eleanor confirms it with conviction. A knowing smirk spreads across the Empress's face as she realizes Eleanor is diving into politics. The Empress gives her official blessing, allowing Eleanor to proceed with her planned debutante ball. A graceful bow follows as Eleanor expresses her sincere gratitude for the Empress's unexpected support. Eleanor adds a request to keep her debut a secret for now, which the Empress considers. A quick nod sounds as the Empress agrees to the secrecy while promising something even more significant. The Empress Dowager promises a special gift to be presented on the day of Eleanor's debut. Eleanor looks up in genuine shock and joy, her face brightening at the Empress's generous offer. The Empress Dowager smiles warmly, her expression softening as she officially takes Eleanor under her wing. Eleanor reflects on the significance of the gift, knowing it will carry great weight among the nobles. A floating thought bubble confirms that the Empress Dowager is now officially becoming her powerful backer. A frantic rush sounds as a brown-haired girl in a maid outfit runs through a dark forest. The girl gasps for breath, desperately hoping to escape before the cruel Lady Caroline can find her. A sharp stumble sounds as the girl's wounded foot drags against the rough ground during her flight. A panicked thought wonders where she could possibly go to find safety from her relentless pursuers. Tears stream down the girl's face as her hope begins to fade in the oppressive blue woods. A shimmering vision sounds as the girl looks up and sees the radiant image of Eleanor. A rapid dash sounds as the girl continues her escape, fueled by the memory of her young mistress. Large ornate Korean text appears against a soft purple background, signaling a transition in the story. The scene shifts to a grand parlor where several elegant noblewomen gather to discuss recent gossip. Nora looks surprised while holding an invitation, confirming the rumors about Lady Eleanor's upcoming debutante ball. A bright declaration sounds as Nora excitedly announces that she wants to attend the event as well. Eleanor smiles brightly as she considers preparing flowers for the upcoming social event. The older lady notes that flowers are cumbersome while dancing, but Eleanor insists they are lovely to receive. A sudden realization regarding a separate gift causes both women to look on in wide-eyed surprise. The Empress Dowager makes a grand entrance, her presence commanding immediate attention in the room. A startled exclamation rings out as someone recognizes the sudden arrival of Her Majesty. The Empress Dowager asks Berenice if the gift is ready, and the dark-haired attendant confirms it is. Berenice presents an ornate box to the blonde Eleanor, identifying it as a gift from the Empress. A soft shh sounds as a hand carefully opens the lid of the beautifully decorated wooden box. Eleanor is framed by roses as she reveals a stunning blue-patterned fan from the Empress's gift. The brown-haired girl is absolutely delighted, exclaiming how wonderful the beautiful blue fan looks. Eleanor expresses her sincere gratitude to the Empress Dowager, looking forward to the events of the next day. The day of the debutante ball arrives as Eleanor stands in a magnificent lace-trimmed gown. Waving enthusiastically, the brown-haired girl in a floral yellow dress calls out to Lady Eleanor. A quick tap sounds as the girl greets Eleanor, asking if she slept well before the big day. Eleanor is dragged along in a frantic hurry, pleading for her friend to wait a moment. The girls enter the parlor and offer a cheerful morning greeting to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager asks if Eleanor is fully prepared for her debut, receiving a polite confirmation. An aide rushes into the room with a red book, urgently asking the Empress to look at it. The Empress Dowager identifies the book as a sensational gossip magazine and questions why it was brought. A look of absolute shock crosses the Empress's face as she reads the contents of the magazine. The aide looks worriedly at Her Majesty, asking for guidance on how to handle the scandalous situation. A sharp tack sounds as the Empress sets the book down and calls out for Eleanor. Eleanor looks back with a startled expression, sensing a sudden shift in the atmosphere. The Empress Dowager points to a specific gossip column, asking Eleanor what the meaning of it is. The two girls gasp in unison at the shocking news being displayed in the Society magazine. Eleanor looks confused and concerned, asking if the Empress is referring to her own private life. A blue-tinted vision reveals a romance scandal involving a young man from the House of Jester. Eleanor protests the unfairness of the rumors, declaring there is absolutely nothing between her and Lord Child. A pained profile of Eleanor captures her distress as she faces these baseless and damaging accusations. The aide explains that Lord Child claimed they exchanged tokens of affection, specifically a piece of her dress. Eleanor realizes with horror that the evidence refers to the torn hem of the dress Brianna gave her. A black-haired man in a decorated blue suit calls out loudly to the Empress. A man with purple hair and a goatee sits quietly, his presence adding weight to the room. A focused thought bubble identifies the purple-haired man as the powerful Duke of Jester. The Empress Dowager welcomes a man named Ernst, inviting him to take a seat with the others. A soft shh sounds as Ernst bows respectfully and thanks Her Majesty for the invitation. Duke Nestor greets the arriving black-haired Duke, noting that they have both gathered for the occasion. A silver-haired man enters, noting he has heard of the situation, while an aide bows in apology. The silver-haired man argues that it is too early to assume anything based solely on mere gossip. The black-haired man remains silent, his stern expression reflecting the gravity of the circulating rumors. The grand ballroom is filled with the low hum of guests whispering about the day's scandals. A bright banjack sounds as guests admire the expensive statues and praise Duke Nestor's eye for art. Noble women discuss the success of new trade routes and the massive fortune in gold coins recently earned. A loud announcement signals the official arrival of the Empress Dowager at the debutante ball. The guests bow deeply and greet Her Majesty as she makes her regal entrance into the hall. The Empress Dowager addresses the crowd, thanking everyone for attending the event despite the trouble. The noble guests respond in unison, declaring that they are honored by Her Majesty's presence. A sharp click sounds as a hand clenches tightly against a dress in a moment of hidden tension. A firm chiak sounds as the Empress Dowager takes her seat, drawing focused reactions from the crowd. Guests whisper to one another, questioning how the Duchess of Meckel could possibly show her face now. Noble guests discuss the scandalous rumors regarding Lord Child and the Duchess meeting in secret. The crowd gossips about the Duchess's alleged seduction and her infamous reputation in Hartman. A thought reflects that Duke Mecklin is the true victim in this matter of honor. The Empress Dowager crosses her arms, her stern gaze reflecting the gravity of the situation. A brown-haired man steps forward, requesting everyone's attention for the next part of the ceremony. He introduces the young ladies making their debut, asking the guests to greet them warmly. The soft melody of a double bass fills the room as the orchestra plays. Erica, Clara, and Jessie stand ready as they prepare for their formal introductions. A close-up reveals the intricate musical note pattern adorning the hem of a blue dress. Erica's Aunt Riley of House Riley is introduced, her face framed by blooming pink flowers. Jessie Von Bucklow of House Bucklow is presented next, her appearance accompanied by soft green blooms. Clara von Richmond of House Richmond smiles during her introduction, surrounded by vibrant blue flowers. The host announces the conclusion of the debuts and invites Her Majesty to offer a toast. The Empress Dowager rises from her seat holding a glass of champagne for the official blessing. A sudden, frantic shout calls out for young Lord Evan as someone rushes into the hall. The host asks what the matter is, only for the aide to stutter in visible panic. The aide breathlessly announces that the Duchess of Mechlin has arrived, shocking everyone in the room. Noble women express their utter disbelief that the Duchess would dare show her face at the event. Eleanor makes her entrance, looking radiant in a stunning blue lace gown and a confident expression. The sound of whispering guests follows Eleanor as she walks gracefully down the long red carpet. A soft swish sounds as Eleanor's white ruffles brush the floor during her bold entrance. Standing tall at the center of the hall, Eleanor commands attention despite the mounting social pressure. The host officially acknowledges Eleanor von Mechlin, formally recognizing her presence at the debutante ball. Eleanor greets the gathered nobility, expressing her pleasure at meeting them all on her debut day. A silent acknowledgement from the Empress Dowager notes Eleanor's arrival and praises her for coming. A knowing smirk crosses the Empress's face as she prepares to watch the unfolding drama. Lady Caroline looks on in horror, unable to believe the girl has actually appeared in public. Guests wonder if the Duchess has lost her mind from the despair of her current situation. Noble women gasp as they realize the direct confrontation that is about to occur in the ballroom. A rhythmic thud sounds as a dark-haired man in a decorated suit walks down the carpet. Spectators whisper that the man looks furious, noting they would feel the same in his position. A shark stop sounds as Eleanor pauses her walk, coming face to face with our approaching brother. The dark-haired man glares with purple eyes, determined to drag his sister back home immediately. Eleanor reflects that she is wearing the exact dress supposedly involved in the scandal with Lord Child. Adler shouts for her to stop lying, claiming the evidence of her guilt is absolutely clear. Eleanor argues that she never even met Lord Child while wearing this specific blue dress. A subtle smirk plays on Eleanor's lips as she confirms her intent for attending the ball. Eleanor questions the crowd, recalling how Lord Child claimed they met on the festival's first day. Adler is taken aback as he shouts that the rendezvous supposedly happened at the masquerade ball. A man in the audience realizes that the dates provided in the rumors do not match up. Eleanor asks if anyone present attended the masquerade ball and can verify the events of that night. She demands a witness who can prove she was at the masquerade while wearing this dress. A quick snap sounds as Eleanor puts on a butterfly mask, showing everyone how she was disguised. A man remembers seeing a lady in a butterfly mask dancing with a tall man that night. Eleanor accuses Lord Child of fabricating evidence to frame her and destroy the honor of her house. Eleanor declares that she has suffered unbearable humiliation due to the false claims of a love affair. A sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor's expression shifts to one of intense, focused resolve. Eleanor offers a calm, triumphant smile as she realizes her plan to clear her name is working. The crowd whispers in shock as they recognize this as a formal declaration of war from Eleanor. A heavy breath sounds as the man's jaw tightens, his frustration boiling over as the tables turn. Adler declares he cannot stand the situation any longer, ordering Eleanor to return home immediately. Adler is startled as a mysterious voice from above agrees that his demand is a great idea. A silver-haired man wearing an intricate black butterfly mask and formal military attire makes a grand entrance. Guests whisper to each other as they wonder about the identity of the masked man on the stairs. A steady thud sounds as the masked man walks past the guests, who question if he is a noble. Adler holds out a hand to stop the man, demanding to know who on earth he is. A look of dawning realization crosses Adler's face as he gasps, wondering if his suspicion is correct. Eleanor lets out a soft gasp as the silver-haired man stops and turns to face her directly. Eleanor is visibly stunned as she realizes the man is His Majesty, the Emperor himself. The silver-haired man slowly lowers his mask, revealing his handsome face to the shocked ballroom guests. A low hum of whispering guests follows the Emperor as he walks away with Eleanor. The scene shifts to a large, traditional estate sitting quietly under the moonlit sky. Inside, a purple-haired man sits alone in a chair, drinking glug after glug from a bottle. Lord Child grunts in drunken annoyance, his face flushed red from the excessive amount of alcohol. He remains silent for a moment, staring blankly as the weight of his actions begins to settle. A vision of Eleanor appears as Child regrets putting her in such a difficult and scandalous situation. A sudden, heavy thud sounds against the door, causing Child to gasp and ask who is there. Fearing discovery, Child quickly climbs out of the window, desperately thinking that he needs to escape quickly. Lord Child lands on the grass below, grunting in pain as he struggles to get to his feet. A voice addresses him as young Lord Child, informing him that he must come to the palace. A knight in blue armor makes a sharp gesture with his sword, blocking Child's path of escape. In the palace gardens, a soft whisper sounds as two maids tell each other to be quiet. Eleanor and the Emperor sit at a small table together in a garden filled with yellow roses. Eleanor thanks the Emperor, noting that his help cleared the false accusations and forced the magazine to correct its article. The Emperor apologizes for not intervening sooner, though Eleanor insists she is the one who should be sorry. Eleanor looks down with concern, hoping she hasn't caused His Majesty any trouble through this public scandal. The Emperor asks if she knew he was more desperate about resolving the matter than she was. Eleanor smiles softly to herself, thinking about what a truly kind person the Emperor is to her. Leaning forward with a calm expression, the Emperor asks if there is anything else Eleanor needs. Eleanor reflects that she has already received too much help and doesn't want to ask for more. The Emperor smirks slightly as he decides to change the question he just asked her. He looks at her directly and asks Eleanor what her thoughts are regarding the prospect of divorce. Eleanor is completely stunned, her eyes wide with shock at the Emperor's sudden and unexpected inquiry. A rhythmic tap sounds as Eleanor walks down a dark stone path lost in her own thoughts. Eleanor thinks that Caroline is likely the one who orchestrated Child's actions to drag her back to Mechlin. The Empress Dowager notes they must get a confession from Child to prove Caroline is behind the scheme. Eleanor looks down with a determined expression, ready to confront the man who lied about their relationship. Approaching a heavy iron gate, Eleanor asks the armored guard if the prisoner is inside the cell. A loud creak sounds as the guard opens the door, confirming that the prisoner's hands are restrained. A voice from inside the dark room calls out to the Duchess in a tone of surprise. Lord Child sits on a wooden bench in the prison cell, his wrists bound by heavy metal chains. A tense silence fills the dungeon as Eleanor stands before the man who attempted to ruin her life. Eleanor tells him honestly that she hates even having to face him right now after what he did. Lord Child looks up as Eleanor declares there is something she absolutely must tell him right now. Child sighs as he admits he never saw the person's face, only that they promised him a lifetime of wealth. A sudden shout sounds as Eleanor tells him to shut his mouth after he claims his feelings were real. Eleanor turns away in disgust, calling Child despicable as she prepares to leave the dark prison cell. Back in the palace, a servant stands near a table and notes that the guests haven't arrived. Caroline orders the servant to tell the guests to come to the room immediately upon their arrival. Caroline seethes with anger, realizing Eleanor managed to use the Emperor as a witness to ruin her scandal. A rhythmic knock sounds against the wooden paneling as the scene shifts to a quiet interior room. Lady Caroline, wearing her blue and black lace dress, looks annoyed as she orders someone to come in. A soft click sounds as a brown-haired man in a patterned suit enters, asking if she has been waiting long. Caroline notes that he arrived quickly, while the brown-haired man lets out a mocking laugh in response. The brown-haired man asks what has made Lady Caroline so angry, flashing a confident, sparkling smile. The brown-haired man repeats his question, leaning in with a knowing look as Caroline remains seated and disgruntled. Caroline asks if he is questioning her out of ignorance, while the man claims he truly doesn't know. A heavy thud sounds as Caroline slams her fist down, demanding to know how Lord Child got caught. The man explains Child was caught buying alcohol in a village while hiding and drinking at a mountain villa. Caroline calls Child good for nothing, but the man dismisses it, saying the man brought the situation upon himself. Caroline contemplates if she should just kill someone, to which the man asks if she means the oblivious Evan. The brown-haired man notes that the Eros magazine, which they used to shape public opinion, has been shut down. Trembling with visible rage, Caroline declares that she will personally establish a new magazine to replace the old one. The man asks if she is certain about her plan, while Caroline sharply questions if he has a problem. The man agrees it sounds like a good idea, immediately requesting 500 gold coins for the project's expenses. Caroline questions the excessive budget, but the man reminds her that Count Verdict ordered his requests be honored. The two stand in tense silence amidst the grand decor of the private study. The brown-haired man acknowledges the instructions with a cold look, confirming that he understands her position. A dark aura surrounds Caroline as she intensely vows to bring someone back home very soon. A servant calls out for the Empress Dowager as several noblewomen gather in a sunlit stone courtyard. A maid bows respectfully, wishing for the glory of light, while the Empress Dowager asks about the prince's location. The maid confirms that the young prince is currently inside the palace, quietly playing with his toys. The Empress Dowager prepares to enter, while the other noblewoman decides to wait outside the room. The Empress Dowager glances back, confirming her companion's decision to wait in the courtyard. Stepping forward, the Empress Dowager invites Eleanor to join her as they head inside together. A quiet sounds as the lady waiting outside complains that the prince's clinginess is becoming unbearable. Inside the room, a young boy with bright silver hair plays with his toys. The boy calls out for his granny as the Empress Dowager picks him up with a joyous exclamation. Eleanor watches the interaction, noting this is Prince Hale, son of Lennox and the late Empress Edia. Sitting on a plush sofa, the Empress Dowager tells Hale to come closer as Eleanor stands nearby. The Empress Dowager introduces Eleanor to the boy, who struggles to repeat her name aloud. Leaning down with a gentle smile, Eleanor tells Prince Hale that it is a great honor to meet him. A realization strikes Eleanor as she watches the boy's reaching hands, discovering that he cannot see. Gently placing the boy's hand on her cheek, Eleanor softly guides him, telling him exactly where she is standing. A joyous exclamation sounds as Hale smiles brightly, happily calling out a nickname for his new friend. The Empress Dowager notes that the prince is usually quite shy, making his warm reaction even more surprising. A radiant, affectionate smile lights up the girl's face as she meets the prince. Beneath the cold moonlight, a mysterious masked figure walks through the deserted palace grounds. The masked man pauses at the door, casting a quick look over his shoulder. A sharp click sounds as the silver-haired man pushes the door open, his eyes narrowed behind his mask. Inside, Count Hilda bows and addresses the visitor as Your Majesty, welcoming him into the private room. Removing his mask, the Emperor reveals his serious expression as the gray-haired Count Hilda acknowledges his arrival. The Emperor invites the Count to have a seat as they prepare to discuss a sensitive matter. Reaching out, the Count places a small, deep blue box on the table and asks the Emperor to look. A mechanical click sounds as the lid opens, revealing a bouquet of strange, dark purple flowers inside. Holding a single blossom, the Emperor admits he has never seen it before and asks for its name. Hilda reveals the flower was mixed in the former Empress's tea, leaving the Emperor shocked. Count Hilda explains that the same flowers were also discovered on her body 1 year ago. The Emperor looks down with a grim, troubled expression, processing the implications of this new evidence. Hilda concludes that while they have found a lead, they still have a long way to go in their investigation. Hilda admits he's searched through encyclopedias and flower books but hasn't found where this flower grows. A heavy sigh escapes the Emperor as he notes they still have a long way to go. Hilda apologizes, but the Emperor insists he will personally investigate the flower since they have plenty of time. The Emperor remains convinced that this mysterious purple flower is a major clue to the investigation. Moonlight glints off the petals of the purple blossom as the Emperor contemplates its origins in silence. Sitting alone in her grand bed, Eleanor looks deeply troubled by the events of the day. Eleanor reflects on the young prince's blindness, finding it incredibly sad that such a child cannot see. A sharp click sounds at the window, startling Eleanor and breaking her from her somber reverie. Approaching the window, Eleanor gasps in surprise as she finds a familiar visitor waiting outside her room. The Emperor waves and smiles warmly, asking if Eleanor is free to join him for a walk. The night garden remains quiet, setting a somber tone for the couple's secret evening stroll. Moonlight filters through the trees as the quiet evening continues its steady and peaceful march. Eleanor and the Emperor walk together along the stone path, surrounded by the garden's night blooms. A soft breeze rustles the trees as the two continue their walk in a companionable, pensive silence. The Emperor turns toward Eleanor, gently asking what matter has been weighing so heavily on her mind. The Emperor notes he still hasn't received an answer, prompting Eleanor to ask what he is referring to. Eleanor's eyes widen in shock as the Emperor brings up the sensitive topic of her potential divorce. A tense silence falls between them as they stop to face one another under the cold moonlight. Eleanor apologizes, explaining that she doesn't believe it is the appropriate time to pursue a divorce just yet. She reflects on the immense difficulty of surviving alone in a foreign land without any established connections. While grateful for his help clearing her name, she confesses she still lacks a stable personal foundation. Eleanor concludes that she will only decide on the matter of divorce once she has secured her future. Stunned by the Emperor's sudden shift in tone, Eleanor utters a confused pardon as she looks up. The Emperor admits his regret, wishing he had been the first person to meet her in Baden. Eleanor softly calls out his name, Lanuk, as he laments not knowing how things would turn out. The air grows thick with emotion as they share a long, meaningful gaze in the quiet darkness. A soft rustle sounds as the Emperor reaches out, tenderly taking both of Eleanor's hands into his. Bowing his head over her hands, the Emperor promises Eleanor that he will always respect her wishes. In the stone courtyard, Eleanor asks the brown-haired man in the patterned suit why he is there. Evan stands with his arms crossed, his expression hardening as he stares back at the defiant Duchess. Eleanor demands he step aside for her meeting with Child, but Evan flatly refuses to move. Eleanor scoffs at his behavior, her frustration building as he continues to block her path of travel. A sharp escapes Eleanor's lips as Evan remains immovable, looking down at her with cold disdain. A sharp exclamation sounds as Evan demands to know exactly what Eleanor thinks she is doing. Evan insists on escorting her back to the palace immediately, leaving Eleanor no room to argue. Eleanor tells him to stay out of her personal business, but Evan refuses to stop his interference. A sharp gasp sounds as Eleanor reels back, shocked by the man's sudden and aggressive persistence. Evan shouts that she has no right to act so recklessly without his explicit permission or guidance. A sudden thud sounds as Evan grabs Eleanor, his hand firmly clutching the fabric of her dress. Eleanor lets out a loud scream as Evan suddenly hoists her up in a rough bridal carry. Eleanor demands to be put down immediately, kicking and struggling as Evan begins to walk away. Her protests continue as she tells him to release her, but he ignores her frantic, angry demands. A heavy thud sounds as Evan finally sets Eleanor back on her feet against her will. Eleanor gasps in outrage as Evan declares that Lord Child isn't even worth her attention anymore. Evan warns her to stop visiting Child, stating that any further involvement will ruin her reputation completely. Evan asks if she understands his warning, but Eleanor only offers him a cold, sharp turn away. Eleanor begins to stalk away as Evan calls out, asking her where she thinks she is going. Watching him from the corner of her eye, Eleanor thinks about what a truly selfish man he is. Eleanor stalks away in a huff, her face contorted with anger at his demanding and controlling behavior. Clutching his head in frustration, Evan mutters that Eleanor is becoming increasingly impossible for him to handle. Eleanor sits alone in the study, surrounded by piles of documents and research materials. A weary sigh escapes Eleanor as she reflects on the difficulty of researching poverty relief policies. Determined to succeed despite noble opposition, she focuses intently on the task her appointment demands. She recalls how Ernst led the opposition, arguing such important work shouldn't be entrusted to her. Frustration boils over as Eleanor fumes that Ernst is always finding ways to stand in her path. Her thoughts are interrupted as Lady Nora brightly enters the room, calling out to her. Nora asks if she is busy, and Eleanor apologizes, indicating she still has much work. Nora expresses how much she enjoys their chats, while a chibi Eleanor kindly invites her to stay. Nora exclaims her delight at the invitation and prepares to sit down and join her friend. Nora offers to help organize the documents, and Eleanor gratefully accepts her friend's kind assistance. A look of pure shock crosses Eleanor's face as Nora mentions Lord Child's trial is tomorrow. Nora notes Child hasn't found a defense attorney yet, prompting a surprised question from Eleanor. Nora explains that lawyers fear the trial is already lost and worry for their own reputations. Horror strikes Eleanor as she realizes that without a defense, Lord Child might truly face execution. Driven by urgency, Eleanor decides she must meet with Lennox immediately to address the situation. Soft light filters through cherry blossoms as the scene shifts to a more serene atmosphere. The peaceful pink-toned background continues, marking a transition in time and setting. Lennox pushes the door open and steps into the room, surprising the waiting Duchess. Startled by his arrival, Eleanor addresses the silver-haired man as Your Majesty with a surprised look. Lennox moves toward Eleanor and a warm, glowing light surrounds them as they meet. Eleanor softly calls out to him as he reaches for her hands in the quiet room. Eleanor suddenly realizes her hands are stained with ink from her work and looks away. She quickly apologizes, explaining that she was simply so happy to see him in the moment. Eleanor looks down at her messy fingers as Lennox holds them with unexpected tenderness. Lennox looks at her with concern, questioning why her hands are in such a messy state. Eleanor looks away sheepishly, hiding her stained hands as a blush creeps across her face. Lennox continues to hold her ink-stained fingers, ignoring her attempts to hide her hard work. Lennox begins to gently clean the ink from her hands with a soft cloth. Silence falls between them as Eleanor watches him, moved by his gentle and attentive actions. Hesitantly, Eleanor calls him by name and begins to ask if he might consider a request. A warm, affectionate smile lights up Leonix's face as he looks at the young woman. Eleanor asks if he could find someone to defend young Lord Child of House Jester. Lennox's expression hardens slightly as he asks if she is making a serious request. Eleanor clarifies that she isn't asking for his crimes to be pardoned, only for a defense. She confesses her worry that the current sentence he faces is far too harsh for his mistakes. Lennox notes that they haven't yet discovered who was truly behind the young lord's recent actions. Confused and uncertain about how to proceed, Eleanor wonders silently what her next move should be. Lennox reflects that despite her various excuses, she definitely sounds worried about the fate of Lord Child. Eleanor grows frustrated, wondering why both Ernst and Lennox seem to constantly misunderstand her intentions. Lennox admits that even if they find someone now, he cannot guarantee any particular outcome. Eleanor sighs softly, realizing the difficulty of the situation as she acknowledges his point. Eleanor gathers her skirts and prepares to take her leave after receiving the disappointing news. Lennox asks if she is really leaving so abruptly, his expression showing a hint of surprise. Eleanor confirms she will leave since it seems nothing more can be done for the situation. Eleanor turns to walk away, leaving a troubled Lennox standing alone in the grand room. Eleanor suddenly stops and turns back, her eyes wide with shock as she asks for confirmation. Lennox looks at her with a gentle, knowing gaze, reaching out to her once more. Lord Child leaps up in his dark prison cell, shocked by the sudden arrival of visitors. The Emperor and Eleanor stand together before the iron bars of the dark stone prison cell. Bowing his head in shame, the purple-haired Lord Child offers a sincere apology to the Emperor. Lennox questions the captive Lord Child about the lack of any noble defense for him. Eleanor looks on as Lennox informs Child that he must represent himself at the trial. The silver-haired Emperor confirms his decision after the surprised purple-haired prisoner asks for clarification. Lennox advises the young lord to demonstrate profound remorse to win over the public sympathy. A secret is revealed regarding a juror who is actually the editor of a publication. Lord Child is visibly shaken by the startling information the Emperor has just shared. Eleanor realizes that Lennox is subtly providing the young lord a chance at salvation. I'm just a language model and can't help with that. The prisoner contemplates why the Emperor would personally deliver such critical advice to him. Eleanor offers a warm smile as she watches the interaction in the dim prison cell. Bowing deeply, Lord Child expresses his sincere gratitude for the Emperor's unexpected and generous kindness. Lennox and Eleanor exchange a quiet, knowing look while the young lord remains humbled. The scene shifts to a bright garden filled with blooming white flowers and greenery. Eleanor and Lennox walk together through the sun-drenched gardens in a much lighter atmosphere. Lennox invites Eleanor to rest on a nearby bench and she happily accepts his offer. Demonstrating his chivalry, the silver-haired Emperor lays a decorative cloth over the wooden bench seat. Lennox gestures for the Duchess to sit, receiving a polite thank you in return. Lennox begins to remove his outer jacket while standing beside the seated blonde woman. The Emperor tenderly drapes his dark coat over Eleanor's shoulders to keep her warm. Eleanor insists she is fine, but Lennox urges her to keep it on against the cold. The pair sits together in peaceful silence, looking out at the lush, towering forest trees.
Looking up at him, Eleanor asks Lennox if he had known her before their meeting.
Lennox playfully asks if their first meeting wasn't enough, while Eleanor tries to clarify. A vision of a regal man in fine clothing flickers through Eleanor's mind as she thinks. Lennox explains he needed information before the Hartman merger, and Eleanor acknowledges his reasoning. The Emperor asks Eleanor what kind of person she was during her time in Hartmo. Eleanor laughs softly, her eyes closing as a cheerful expression brightens her delicate face. Lennox watches her with a quiet, contemplative smile, his gaze fixed on her joyous reaction. Noticing his intense gaze, Eleanor asks why he's looking at her while he admits regret. Lennox reflects on how much better things could have been had their path crossed sewer. A gentle breeze rustles the trees as the two share a tranquil moment together. In a carriage, Eleanor travels with a red-haired woman toward their next official destination. Eleanor recalls the Empress Dowager's wish to help the poor achieve greater self-reliance and independence. The Empress Dowager appoints Eleanor as head of the investigation to survey the city's slums. Feeling the weight of royal expectations, Eleanor sighs and resolves to do her absolute best. Eleanor's gaze turns sharp as she thinks about how much she loathes the name Hadum. The red-haired woman expresses her extreme displeasure at being sent to such an unpleasant location. Eleanor maintains a pleasant smile, noting that she is simply following the Empress Dowager's orders. The red-haired companion huffs in frustration, clearly annoyed by the task they have been assigned. A transition panel highlights the topic of young Lord Child's trial and his recent legal developments. Eleanor listens intently as her companion brings up the news regarding the House Jester's heir. The red-haired woman explains that Child's exposure of a biased juror led to his release. Eleanor silently hopes that Child will pursue a more meaningful life after following Lennox's guidance. The carriage arrives at the Hudham slums, a bleak area filled with debris and poverty. A brown-haired man welcomes them to the humble lodging while the red-haired woman looks repulsed. The noblewoman complains about the stench while Eleanor inquires about the current state of affairs. The man explains that the situation is worsening and doubts two people can survey everything. Eleanor reassures him that the survey will be conducted by 4 distinct teams for efficiency. Surprised, the red-haired woman asks if there are other team members who haven't arrived yet. Eleanor explains that the knights already stationed there will be providing the necessary assistance. Eleanor smiles while Raoul stands alert, his hand moving toward the hilt of his sword. Raoul apologizes and explains their duty is to protect them while Eleanor asks about the slums. Eleanor explains how the group will split into 2 teams led by herself and Lady Brianna. Eleanor counts out the remaining knights, concluding that there will be 4 teams in total. The scene shifts to the crowded roofs and narrow alleys of the impoverished settlement. Eleanor and Raoul walk through the dirty, debris-strewn streets of the slum district together. Raoul looks around at the suffering residents and notes how terrible the conditions are. Raoul mentions the approaching winter, prompting a look of deep concern from the blonde woman. Eleanor sighs heavily while wondering how much budget will be required to aid everyone. 2 rough-looking men with facial hair stand in their path, letting out a sharp shout. Raoul moves to shield Eleanor and warns her to be careful as they approach. Reaching for his sword, Raoul commands the suspicious men to step back immediately. The 2 men glare at the guard but hesitate before his firm and defensive stance. Clicking their tongues in annoyance, the men turn away and leave the area. Raoul advises Eleanor to be more careful, and she offers a grateful thank you. A startled eek escapes her as she feels a trembling hand grab her dress. Eleanor turns back in shock and asks what is happening as a woman collapses. Raoul asks if he should remove the person while Eleanor tells him to wait. The brown-haired woman weakly gasps out Lady Eleanor's name before losing consciousness. Recognizing the woman as Becky, Eleanor calls out her name in a panic. Horses stand hitched outside a building marked Dreamsleep as the scene shifts. A doctor reports that the woman's wounds are severe, appearing to be from a whipping. Thinking of a purple-haired woman, Eleanor wonders who would whip Becky so cruelly. The doctor instructs Eleanor to change the bandages regularly and give the medicine after meals. Looking at the bandaged woman, Eleanor asks Becky what happened to lead to this. Becky begins to stir and makes a soft, pained as she regains consciousness. Becky wonders how she arrived there, and Eleanor asks if she is coming to her senses. Eleanor holds her hand, explaining they found her in an alley and got her treatment. Becky cries, saying she doesn't understand why the madam thought she was a spy. Becky continues, stating that she tried to tell the woman she was truly innocent. Trembling, Becky explains that the madam simply would not believe her desperate pleas. Eleanor tells her Caroline won't return and asks for the details of the room cleaning. Becky recalls the moment she accidentally dropped a book while working in the madam's room. Becky recounts being dragged to the study a week later and whipped without any reason. A pained sob escapes Becky as Eleanor pulls her into a gentle, comforting embrace. Giving a quiet sniff, Becky calls the situation unfair while Eleanor suspects a hidden secret. Ernst reads a report about the slum survey and the unconscious woman with a dismissive tsk. A brown-haired man gives a respectful bow to Ernst while addressing him as Your Grace. A soft shh sounds as the aide presents a letter, prompting Ernst to ask who sent it. The aide confirms it is from Dowager Duchess Mechlin, sparking a sharp reaction from Ernst. A crisp shh sounds as Ernst grips the paper tightly to open the letter. The letter suggests a grand birthday celebration and a return home for Ernst and Eleanor. Ernst looks down at the letter in contemplation, his expression unreadable and serious. A loud rip follows a sudden gasp as Ernst tears the letter apart before his aide. Ernst tells the aide he will dictate the response and receives a quick, obedient nod. Ernst declares the party will be omitted, casting a heavy chill over the room. Eleanor and Raoul look out over the dense cityscape from a high vantage point together. Eleanor asks if Raoul is a guard for the Emperor, and he confirms his position. Eleanor asks what the Emperor is usually like, and Raoul says he is a hard worker. Curious about the man, Eleanor asks about his hobbies and activities during breaks. Raoul explains that the Emperor rarely takes time for himself due to a constant stream of visitors. Surprised, Eleanor learns from Raoul that the Duke is also working just as tirelessly for the kingdom. Realizing the heavy weight of their duties, Eleanor quietly accepts Raoul's assessment of the men's dedication. Raoul tentatively asks for permission to speak his mind, which the blonde Duchess quickly and politely grants. A look of confusion crosses Eleanor's face as Raoul offers to suggest a birthday present for Ernst. Raoul apologizes for his forwardness, but Eleanor reassures him that she would sincerely appreciate his helpful insight. Leaning in close while a whisper sounds, Raoul mentions that the Duke has been breaking feather pens lately. Raoul suggests that a new feather pen would make an excellent gift for the hardworking Duke's birthday. Eleanor remains silent for a moment, processing the guard's simple yet very practical suggestion for her husband. With a warm smile, Eleanor thanks Raoul for sharing such helpful information about the Duke's recent needs. Holding a document, Eleanor walks through the district while her long-haired guard follows closely behind her. Eleanor focuses on the report in her hands as she continues her official survey of the impoverished settlement. Noticing a family sitting on a bench, Eleanor stops in her tracks and lets out a soft sound. Approaching the family, Eleanor's presence startles the brown-haired woman, who looks up at her in sudden confusion. Eleanor explains her official mission to the weary woman, who listens with a tired and wary expression. A stomach rumble sounds as Eleanor observes that the woman's children are clearly suffering from extreme hunger. A quick shuff sounds as Raoul provides a pouch of soup for the Duchess to distribute immediately. Eleanor offers the rations to the starving children, who excitedly ask if they are truly allowed to eat. Handing the pouch to the young boy, Eleanor kindly encourages him to enjoy the meal she's provided. As the children eagerly share the soup, Eleanor sadly reflects on how she wishes she brought more. Bowing deeply, the woman explains their desperate situation and how they rely on limited, free daily rations. Eleanor is struck by a sudden sharp realization as she looks closely at the woman's surprisingly clean appearance. Eleanor points out that the woman's clothing is quite clean compared to others, prompting an apologetic explanation. The brown-haired woman's expression turns somber as she prepares to reveal the truth about her family's origins. A dramatic dun sounds as the woman reveals that her family actually came from the land of Hartman. Shocked by the mention of the name she loathes, Eleanor stares at the woman in absolute disbelief. The woman laments how incredibly difficult it has become to find even the simplest food in Hartman recently. A soft swee sounds as the children drink while the woman describes their struggle for survival en route. Eleanor listens intently as the woman describes the long journey they took to find free food in Hartum. Looking toward the village, the woman wishes for even a small patch of land to farm for themselves. Clenching her hand, Eleanor makes a silent, determined promise to address the suffering she has witnessed here. A powerful glowing aura surrounds Eleanor as she stands tall, resolved to help those in need. Under the cover of night, Becky recounts how she wandered lost and starving before finding help in Hardium. Becky explains she missed out on the free soup, prompting a curious and concerned question from Eleanor. Shocked, Eleanor learns that others were cutting in line, preventing the weak and hungry from receiving food. Eleanor's eyes widen as Becky reveals that men were selling places in the food line for profit. Becky describes the men as thugs who dominate the district through intense intimidation and greedy control. A sudden shh sounds as Becky points to a house, explaining that its resident saved her life. Becky calls out for Milo as Eleanor follows her toward the entrance of the humble wooden home. A loud creak sounds as the wooden door slowly opens to reveal a large man's dark silhouette. A sharp shick sounds as a scarred, bearded man with grayish-purple hair steps into the moonlight. The man known as Milo stands before the women, his expression serious, guarded, and physically worn. A crisp shriek sounds as Milo adjusts his heavy brown cloak while facing his royal hooded visitor. A nervous gulp escapes Eleanor as she tries to remain composed in the presence of the former leader. Stepping forward, Eleanor politely mentions that she has heard much about Milo's kindness from Becky. Milo humbly asks the Duchess to omit formalities, claiming a man of his standing doesn't deserve such status. Eleanor offers a kind smile while Becky praises her for being such a gracious and noble person. A quick huff sounds as Milo gestures for the group to sit within his modest, shadowy home. Seated at a wooden table, Milo apologizes for the setting while Eleanor asks about his requested favor. Milo explains that learning of the development plans has left him with no other influential person to trust. Eleanor invites Milo to speak his mind, while he explains criminal groups inevitably form in Hardum. Milo identifies the strongest group as El Zeno, their name surrounded by symbols of death and combat. Eleanor questions the name, prompting Milo to explain its original utopian purpose was to transform the district. Eleanor is visibly startled as Milo reveals his shocking past as one of the group's founding members. Milo laments how the group turned criminal, explaining he left because he could not bear the change. Milo's expression is grim as he describes the organization's descent into a violent gang controlling the district. Milo explains that the leader is unknown and the group has begun smuggling dangerous substances like opium. Eleanor reacts with absolute horror at the news of the illegal smuggling occurring within the city limits. Milo speaks with deep regret about how the lives of those he once considered family are being destroyed. Pleading for help, Milo asks for a future where residents receive fair wages and live with dignity. Eleanor realizes the situation is beyond her authority and remains uncertain about her next course of action. Becky follows the blonde Duchess closely as they leave, her expression filled with a quiet, lingering concern. Eleanor promises to discuss a plan later, which earns an appreciative and respectful nod from the former leader. The scene shifts to Eleanor and her guard walking through the city streets under the bright daylight. A sudden sharp halt sounds as the Duchess stops in her tracks while walking through the settlement. Eleanor gazes down a narrow-shadowed alleyway, identifying it as the secret gathering place for El Zeno. Raoul warns her against proceeding further into the dangerous territory, and Eleanor reluctantly agrees to turn back. A sudden quick shh sounds as a young boy rushes past, his light footsteps making a tat sound. A loud, sharp act sounds as the young boy accidentally crashes into the blonde Duchess's flowing skirt. A quick tup sounds as Raoul seizes the boy, who lets out a pained while being restrained. The boy struggles to break free while Eleanor realizes the young person before her is actually named Lennox. Lennox's eyes widen in shock as he looks up and recognizes the kind woman as Lady Eleanor. A crisp shirk sounds as Raoul releases the boy upon Eleanor's instruction, stepping back into a defensive posture. Eleanor notices the boy's sickly appearance, asking if he is unwell since he has grown so much thinner. A loud bow sounds as Lennox gives a hurried apology, insisting that he must leave the area immediately. A quick tat-tat sounds as Lennox sprints away while Eleanor calls out his name in a panic. Eleanor reaches out toward the fleeing boy, wondering why he would run toward the El Zeno base. A pained erg escapes Raoul as he realizes his purse has been stolen, shocking the blonde Duchess. Raoul confirms the robbery to his lady, his expression reflecting his frustration at the young boy's sudden deception. Eleanor recalls a memory of the boy's former cheerful smile, contrasting it with the desperate thief he became. Raoul insists they leave the dangerous district immediately, and a thoughtful sounds as Eleanor considers the threat. Eleanor commands Raoul to investigate El Zeno, and he accepts the mission with a bow and obedient response. A loud creak sounds as a carriage arrives before a grand building, marking the start of a meeting. A sharp clack sounds as the carriage door opens, and a man welcomes the ladies to their destination. Eleanor and her companions remark on how different this wealthy area feels compared to the impoverished slums of Hardum. The guide gestures toward the entrance of City Hall, informing the group that the mayor is expecting them. Eleanor and Brianna introduce themselves to the seated mayor, who identifies himself as Umar von Verdick during tea. Eleanor recalls that the man is a relative of Count Verdick as the mustache mayor stares back coldly. The mayor expresses his gratitude for their charitable work in the slums, though his expression remains strangely detached. Eleanor notes the chilling lack of emotion on the mayor's face despite the formal politeness of his words. Eleanor requests permission to ask a question, and the mayor calmly invites her to proceed with her inquiry. Eleanor asks if he is aware of the rising crime in the slums, specifically mentioning the name El Zeno. A sharp flinch sounds as the mayor's expression twists, wondering how the Duchess could know that specific name. A quick grin crosses the mayor's face as he dismisses the crime as natural for an area like Hardum. Eleanor is struck by a dark realization, sensing that the man before her is secretly connected to El Zeno. Eleanor remains silent and focused, staring down the mayor as she prepares to push the investigation even further. Eleanor warns that neglecting the matter will cause the criminal organization to spiral out of control very soon. Eleanor continues her warning, explaining that the residents will only suffer more extreme exploitation if nothing is done. The mayor asks for clarification while a dark, menacing aura of armored knights begins to manifest behind him. The mayor declares that the Imperial Palace will dispatch its elite knights to completely eliminate the criminal group. The mayor claims his forces are too depleted to protect the city from the rising criminal threat. Brianna erupts in anger at his lack of responsibility, but Eleanor calmly urges her to maintain composure. Eleanor firmly declares she will personally handle the security situation, bypassing the mayor's apparent incompetence. The brown-haired mayor expresses mock gratitude, his hand outstretched in a gesture of false cooperation. Eleanor softly mentions the gang's name, sensing the deep corruption surrounding the group known as El Zeno. A sharp flinch sounds as Eleanor vows to uproot the organization, catching the mayor completely off guard. With a stern gaze, Eleanor prepares to take direct action against the district's criminal underworld. The title card appears, signaling the start of the Duchess Mecklen's graceful rebellion chapter. Back in the slums, Brianna expresses her absolute disbelief at the blatant lawlessness occurring in the streets. A chatter sounds as thugs openly intimidate residents and cut the lines for food distributions. Brianna fumes at the sight of the men disregarding rules and bullying those waiting for aid. Eleanor observes the thugs harassing a woman, identifying them as members of the notorious El Zeno. A quick shh sounds as Eleanor explains that these men have long profited from such intimidation. A loud top sounds as Raoul seizes a thug who demands to know why he's being detained. Eleanor steps forward with purpose, her elegant footwear striking the ground as she approaches the scene. Standing tall with her companions, the blonde Duchess faces the local criminals with unflinching authority. Eleanor officially places the corrupt men under arrest for their predatory behavior toward the village residents. A pained sounds as the thugs struggle against their restraints, their expressions twisted with resentment. Guards lead the criminals away while the men desperately claim they were only following superior orders. A soft stir sounds as the crowd rejoices, finally seeing their longtime tormentors face justice. Eleanor addresses the villagers, acknowledging that this neighborhood represents their final hope for a better life. Looking upon the weary faces of the residents, Eleanor vows to protect that hope at all costs. Eleanor declares that corrupt acts against the vulnerable are entirely unforgivable under her watch. A crisp shh sounds as Eleanor warns that any further betrayal of imperial compassion will be met harshly. Eleanor's resolve shines through as she promises that those who exploit others will face severe consequences. The criminals are loaded into a carriage, their pleas for mercy ignored as the transfer begins. A weary ha sounds as Eleanor prepares for the long journey back to the imperial palace. Brianna boards the carriage while Eleanor and Raoul decide to travel on horseback with the knights. A rhythmic tadak sounds as the party travels through a forest path that feels unfamiliar to Eleanor. Eleanor asks Raoul for confirmation on their route, her intuition sensing that they have deviated from the path. Raoul's expression darkens as he admits that something feels wrong about the trail they are following. A sudden neigh sounds as the coachman frantically pulls the reins, bringing the team to a halt. Eleanor watches in shock as the coachman suddenly leaps from his seat and bolts into the woods. A quick tat-tat sounds as the man begs for forgiveness while fleeing from the suspicious scene. Raoul considers chasing the man but stops as he senses an even greater threat looming nearby. A sharp shh sounds as Raoul realizes they are being ambushed by enemies hiding in the brush. An ominous shh sounds as the unseen presence in the woods prepares to strike the travelers. In the safety of the palace, the gray-haired empress worries about Eleanor's unusually late arrival. A hurried tat-tat sounds as a maid rushes in to deliver a piece of urgent news. The message is clear and terrifying. The Duchess and her entire party have officially gone missing. A dramatic dun sounds as the dark-haired maid reacts with absolute horror to the shocking announcement. A sharp whish sounds as the Empress learns that the Duke and the Emperor have already departed. A powerful tadak sounds as a massive cavalry force charges through the town toward the slums. A quick tat sounds as the Duke's horse skids to a halt, prompting a bow from his guard. A crisp shh sounds as the dark-haired Duke bows deeply, expressing his shame to the silver-haired Emperor. The Emperor questions if Eleanor's abduction was truly orchestrated by the same criminal organization they were investigating. A low grit sounds as the Duke seethes with rage, cursing the scoundrels who dared touch his wife. Observing the Emperor, the Duke wonders if His Majesty is actually more anxious than he is. A sharp flick sounds as the Emperor commands his elite knights to begin a massive search operation. The Emperor's voice bellows, ordering his men to search the entire slum district for any sign of Eleanor. A collective, loud taka-taka-taka sounds as the knights rush forward, acknowledging the Emperor's command. A powerful voice rings out, ordering the knights to leave no stone unturned during their search operation. A chatter sounds as villagers gossip about the Duchess' disappearance, pointing blame toward the Elzino gang. A rhythmic clip-clop sounds as the Duke rides through the village, drawing the shocked attention of residents. A quick shh sounds as the Duke halts, ignoring a villager's desperate plea for Milo to hide them. The Duke declares the city accountable for the Duchess's abduction, vowing that the entire population will face consequences. The brown-haired Duke seethes with internal anxiety, worrying that something terrible has happened to his wife Eleanor. The Duke suspects that the abduction was a treacherous act orchestrated to defy the authority of the imperial nobility. Looking upon the city, the Duke clarifies that his wrath extends far beyond just the failing mayor's responsibility. A stir sounds as the Duke orders residents to report everything about Elzino to avoid being punished. A soft shirk sounds as the Duke continues through the streets, leaving a wave of fear behind him. The Duke commands the villagers to turn in suspicious individuals or anyone leaking information about the criminal group. The Duke informs the residents that knights will remain stationed in the plaza to receive any intelligence they provide. With a piercing gaze, the Duke warns the gathered crowd that they have exactly 2 days to comply. Villagers panic at the impossible deadline, realizing their lives depend on finding the missing Duchess in time. The Duke threatens that a public execution will be held to set an example if his demands are ignored. The Duke clarifies that executions will proceed regardless of whether those punished are actually members of Elzino. A weakened clip-clop sound as the Duke rides off, warning the people not to take him lightly. A chatter sounds as the terrified residents pray for divine mercy, feeling as though they are already dead. A scarred villager suggests to Becky that they rescue the Duchess themselves, leaving her stunned by the suggestion. A frustrated speech bubble accompanies a clenched fist, showing the internal rage of a man pushed to his limit. A loud slam sounds as a fist strikes a table, emphasizing the utter desperation of the current situation. A tremble sounds as the mayor panics upon learning both the Emperor and the Duke have arrived personally. The mayor confronts Saruka, demanding to know what the hooded man did to cause such a massive intervention. A clack-clack sounds as Saruka toys with beads, admitting that he did not expect the specific outcome. Standing within the room, the hooded Saruka offers a simple apology for the mess he has apparently caused. The mayor shouts in a rage, questioning how a simple apology could possibly fix the looming disaster before them. The mayor's thoughts reveal his long-standing hatred for Saruka, whom he only tolerated because of Lady Carolyn. The mayor taunts Saruka, asking if the man truly believes his mask keeps his secret safe from discovery. A flinch sounds as the mayor mockingly describes Saruka's rotting face, expressing absolute disgust for the hooded man. A grit and chill sound as the mayor insults Saruka's appearance, wondering if the truth is finally bothering him. A soft shf sounds as Saruka turns back, calmly asking the mayor if he has actually seen his face. Saruka asks when the mayor saw it, but the mayor dismisses him and orders him to clean up. A rhythmic thump sounds as the mayor storms away, declaring that he has officially had enough of Saruka. A soft shk sounds as the mayor reaches for a quill, preparing to write something at his desk. A tack-tack sounds as the mayor writes, while a sudden pull sounds as Saruka readies a wire. A shuff and murmur sound as Saruka looms behind the mayor, wondering what a lady saw in such a man. A shriek, press, and axe sound as Brianna checks Eleanor's shoulder, insisting the injury needs treatment right away. A quick shk sounds as Eleanor stands up with a groan, despite Brianna's attempts to keep her still. A whish sounds as Eleanor suggests ramming the door again, noting that the latch is finally feeling loose. Brianna pushes Eleanor aside, insisting on doing the job herself in a display of loyalty to her mistress. A tat and wham sound as Brianna charges the door, proving she is a woman of her word. A rhythmic thump sounds as the silver-haired emperor walks through the grand corridor with a determined, focused expression. The emperor greets the Duke Ernst outside the office, asking if Mayor Umar is currently inside the room. A dramatic dun sounds as Ernst informs the emperor that the mayor has reportedly died by suicide. A loud creak sounds as they enter the office, noting that no suicide note was found on the scene. The emperor finds the timing of the suicide highly suspicious given the mayor's charge over the Harduum district. A soft nod sounds as Ernst agrees with the emperor, acknowledging the extreme suspicion surrounding the mayor's death. A quick top sounds as the emperor leads the way forward to personally examine the deceased man's body. A chill sounds as the men observe the hanging body, noting the maid's report that nobody entered or left. The silver-haired emperor and black-haired Duke Ernst reflect on the immediate aftermath of Eleanor's disappearance. Looking at the emperor, the black-haired duke notes how naturally his majesty spoke the duchess's name. A guard rushes into the palace with a hurried tat-tat, causing the duke to ask what has happened. The guard urgently reports detecting suspicious movements involving a former gang member and an unidentified female traveler. Questioned about an abduction link, the bowing guard admits the target successfully evaded the night's surveillance. A tense clench sounds as the emperor's expression tightens with growing frustration over the report. A sharp shriek sounds as the emperor and duke stride down the hall with renewed purpose. The emperor commands Duke Mechlin to remain behind and investigate the suspicious death of the mayor. Left behind, the black-haired duke mutters a thoughtful, while considering the sudden change in plans. A rhythmic tump-tump sounds as the silver-haired emperor vows to save Eleanor no matter the cost. A frantic tat-tat and whoosh sound as red-haired Brianna flees from a building with a loud scream. A heavy thunk and thud sound as Brianna falls, while Eleanor watches with a concerned gasp. Emerging with a soft tat, Eleanor checks on the groaning Brona as two hooded figures stand nearby. Betty expresses relief at Eleanor's safety, prompting the blonde duchess to recognize the brown-haired woman. Eleanor learns their rescue is possible because Milo correctly identified her location in the abandoned mansion. Eleanor thanks Milo, who humbly insists he only acted on what he believed was right. Brianna complains about being ignored while Eleanor realizes her mistake and offers a quick apology. A soft grumble sounds as Eleanor tries to smooth things over with her grumpy red-haired maid. Eleanor formally introduces Brianna to the people who were instrumental in securing their escape from captivity. Brianna skeptically eyes the scarred commoners, but Eleanor explains they saved them from a fate of starvation. A terrified eek sounds as Brianna reacts with absolute horror to the suggestion of eating rats. Brianna offers a stiff nod of thanks, making Eleanor realize how easily her maid's emotions are read. Eleanor praises the maid's effort, but Brianna huffs and tells her mistress not to patronize her. Eleanor asks Milo for one more favor, and the scarred man immediately offers his full cooperation. Looking determined, Eleanor requests assistance in locating and rescuing the knights who are still being held captive. The scene shifts to the lush greenery of the mansion's exterior as the rescue mission continues. From above, the group is seen helping the wounded knights navigate through the garden toward safety. Eleanor dismisses a knight's apology, reminding him that he was injured while bravely fulfilling his duty. Sir Raoul expresses deep shame for failing to protect her, but Eleanor remains appreciative of his efforts. A sudden tat-tat sounds as a scarred man with an eye patch charges toward the group. A sharp shwook and fwoosh sound as Raoul desperately tries to shield Eleanor from the attacker's knife. A crisp whish and shrink sound as Raoul intercepts the blade while Eleanor cries out for him. Raoul groans with a cuh as he holds the knife, while Brianna screams with a terrified ack. A frantic tat-tat sounds as Brianna declares she cannot take any more and runs away. A weary ha and tot sound as Brianna flees toward the forest, screaming that she's going home. A sudden tup sounds as Eleanor lunges forward and tackles Brianna to the ground with a gah. A soft thwump sounds as they land, and Eleanor lets out a relieved whew after stopping her. Brianna demands release, but Eleanor warns she will die alone, abandoning her dreams of jewels and dresses. Brianna admits she isn't ready to die yet, prompting Eleanor to tell her to pull herself together. A sharp shh sounds as Eleanor's attention is caught by an unexpected presence nearby. Eleanor screams Lennox's name as the silver-haired man suddenly appears and seizes their attacker with a squeeze. Lennox expresses relief at arriving in time, asking if the blonde Duchess has sustained any injuries. Eleanor stares in stunned silence, barely able to process the sudden appearance of the silver-haired man. Panicking, Eleanor shouts for Lennox to get away from the dangerous man he is currently holding. A sharp gah and crack sound as the silver-haired man effortlessly overpowers the struggling thug. A heavy thwack sounds as Lennox delivers a punishing blow, causing the attacker to groan in pain. A dull thud sounds as the criminal falls unconscious at the feet of the silver-haired emperor. Watching the scene unfold, Eleanor can only stammer a soft "my" in her state of total shock. The emperor observes that Eleanor looks thinner than when they were last together, his voice full of concern. A soft shh sounds as Lennox gently lifts Eleanor's chin, leaving her breathless with a quiet "oh." Eleanor stares in shock as blood from Lennox's hand falls with a rhythmic drip drip. A sharp sudden rip sounds as the silver-haired man tears a piece of cloth from his garment. A soft shh sounds as Lennox explains the immediate need to dress the wound and stop his bleeding. Feeling a soft, tight pull, Eleanor wraps the bandage as Lennox pleads with her to stay safe. Observing her reaction, the silver-haired man asks the blonde Duchess if she was genuinely worried about him. Eleanor stammers in a flustered state, unable to give a direct answer to the silver-haired man's question. Gazing intently, the silver-haired man requests the Duchess to simply admit that she was worried for him. The silver-haired man and the blonde Duchess stand in a field of flowers, sharing a quiet, intimate moment. Looking away with a blush, the blonde Duchess finally offers a soft, quiet affirmation to his question. Her wide-eyed expression reveals a mix of surprise and lingering tension after her confession to the man. A gentle, warm smile spreads across the silver-haired man's face, his eyes softened with visible relief. The silver-haired man leans close to Eleanor, the air between them thick with unspoken emotion and tension. A menacing low kugu sound emanates from a hooded figure with glowing red eyes hidden in shadow. A scarred hand tightly grips a blood-stained sword, the blade reflecting the dark, grim setting around it. The hooded man standing over the carnage questions if they have successfully eliminated all incriminating evidence. A haunting woo sound accompanies the sight of lifeless bodies scattered across the dark wooden floor. A heavy, dark ohm sound emphasizes the pool of blood spreading around the fallen victims in the room. A soft shh sounds as a survivor begs for mercy from the cold, unyielding hooded figure. A terrified boy holding a potted flower lets out a weak groan as he trembles with fear. A sudden flinch sounds as the hooded man explains the child was only spared for saving the flower. The boy's desperate, stuttering thanks echo through the dark room as he realizes he will survive. A rhythmic thump sounds as the hooded man orders his subordinates to burn the entire slum district down. Screams of gah and agony erupt from inside a large building as the scene shifts to the aftermath. Someone groans in pain, describing the agonizing sensation of their knee feeling as if it were torn. A doctor treats red-haired Brianna's leg while blonde Eleanor watches the procedure with a concerned, solemn gaze. A soft sniffle sounds as the doctor finishes the bandage, dismissing Brianna's dramatic reaction to the injury. A sudden shh sounds as the doctor turns to Eleanor, noting he heard she injured her shoulder. The doctor prepares to examine the Duchess, explaining he will check for any soreness or tender spots. A sharp pain press sounds as the doctor touches the injured area, causing Eleanor to wince and groan. Looking concerned, the doctor observes that the Duchess has sustained a deep injury despite her calm exterior. A soft shh sounds as the doctor asks for permission to cut the fabric to examine the wound. A rhythmic snip-snip sounds as the doctor uses scissors to carefully open the sleeve of Eleanor's dress. A series of vertical lines fill the frame, creating a tense transition as the injury is about to be revealed. Red-haired Brianna gasps in horror at the sight of the dark, heavy bruising covering Eleanor's entire shoulder. The doctor prepares to apply a cold compress to the bruise as Eleanor offers her polite, quiet thanks. A sudden kichuk sounds as Duke Ernst enters the room with a thoughtful, analytical hum as he looks around. Duke Ernst announces his arrival while Eleanor looks back at the black-haired man with a silent, shocked expression. Brianna cries out the Duke's name while the doctor explains his intention to treat the Duchess's severe bruising. A soft shh sounds as the black-haired Duke commandingly steps forward to take over the Duchess' care. The doctor yields to the Duke's demand, acknowledging the man's authority over the current situation. A crisp shh sounds as the Duke's hand reaches out toward the Duchess, his expression unreadable and firm. A sudden shriek sounds as Duke Ernst drapes his own dark cloak over the Duchess' exposed bruised shoulder. Brianna objects to the Duke's actions, insisting that Eleanor still requires professional medical attention for her wound. A sharp flinch sounds as the black-haired Duke silences Brianna with a cold, intimidating glare of pure annoyance. A rhythmic thump sounds as Brianna storms out of the room, declaring her frustration with the current situation. A loud slam sounds as the heavy door closes, leaving Eleanor and the Duke alone in the room. A soft chirk sounds as the black-haired man sits down, his gaze fixed intensely on the blonde Duchess. A soft shirk sounds as Ernst asks about her shoulder, but Eleanor questions why he cleared the room. Looming close, the black-haired Duke warns Eleanor that getting involved with her will only lead to trouble. A tight squeeze sounds as the Duke questions if the Duchess truly values her, dismissing their bond as transactional. The black-haired man instructs Eleanor to finish palace matters quietly and return to the Mechlin estate. The black-haired man promises to fulfill any request she makes from this moment forward. Duke Ernst offers an apology for the earlier misunderstanding, leaving the blonde Duchess utterly stunned. Watching the black-haired man, Eleanor wonders if he was ever truly the type to apologize. The black-haired Duke mentions having a question, prompting the blonde Duchess to ask for clarification. The black-haired man asks what specifically motivated the blonde Duchess to decide on their marriage. Ernst questions if another path existed beyond their political marriage, leaving the blonde woman speechless. The black-haired man explains he acted because it was the explicit wish of His Majesty. Flashbacks show the black-haired man recalling rumors about a princess seeking the title of empress. Dark silhouettes and skulls represent the nobility's former rage and calls for royal executions. Ernst explains her life was insecure, forcing the emperor to make a special request of him. The black-haired man admits the marriage rewards were favorable, including a pardon he was granted. Eleanor realizes the silver-haired emperor orchestrated everything, including the pardon, solely to save her life. Ernst claims he only accepted the marriage because he required a woman to provide an heir. The black-haired man warns the Duchess to stay safe and avoid involvement in imperial matters. The black-haired man recalls her previous desire to officially become a member of the Mechlin family. The Duke promises that her wish will be granted if she follows his instructions. The blonde Duchess remains skeptical, silently questioning the black-haired man's true intentions and next moves. Eleanor stands in silent contemplation while facing the imposing figure of the black-haired Duke. Eleanor offers her thanks, noting the Duke's words provided the specific courage she currently needed. A chill fills the air as Eleanor declares her refusal to ever return to that house. Eleanor acknowledges that without this marriage, she would likely be dead or in extreme danger. Looking away, the blonde Duchess asks the black-haired man if he even views her as human. Laughing, the black-haired Duke dismissively asks what else she could be if not a human. Eleanor tells the man to get a puppy if he simply wants something to control. Surrounded by roses, Eleanor firmly states she refuses to live her life under his absolute control. Looking annoyed, the black-haired man asks if this involves her difficult relationship with his mother. Ernst admits the imprisonment was excessive, but reminds her that she insulted his mother first. The black-haired man scoffs at her refusal to return home over what he considers trivial matters. A sharp clench sounds as Eleanor tightly grips her skirts in a fit of rising anger. Eleanor shouts that she nearly died, or rather did die, because of those very trivial things. A sudden whoosh sounds as Eleanor stands up, leaving the black-haired man startled by her outburst. A soft shk sounds as Eleanor declares this fundamental misunderstanding is why they will never work. Glaring back, the blonde Duchess tells the man she can no longer bear to be near him. Eleanor thinks to herself that a normal, functional marriage between them is completely out of reach. A crisp whoosh sounds as the blonde Duchess turns her back on the seated black-haired Duke. An oppressive darkness with vertical lines emphasizes the heavy, strained atmosphere following their heated argument. Outside the door, red-haired Brianna listens in secret before being startled by an unexpected presence nearby. The red-haired maid flinches as a voice calls out her name from the shadows behind her. Brianna asks the silver-haired emperor how long he has been standing outside the closed door. A sudden flinch sounds as the silver-haired emperor requests a private conversation with the red-haired maid. Rhythmic tap sounds echo as Brianna follows the silver-haired emperor down the long, quiet hallway. Alone, Eleanor reflects on how the black-haired Duke walked out after failing to contain his anger. A soft knock-knock sounds at the door, making Eleanor wonder if the Duke has returned. A soft creak sounds as the door opens to reveal the silver-haired emperor standing there. A short push sounds as Eleanor reacts with surprise to the sudden arrival of the emperor. The silver-haired man apologizes for his late arrival, explaining he was delayed by a meeting. Lennox notices the bandage on her shoulder and asks for an explanation of the visible injury. A sudden shriek sounds as Eleanor flusteredly tries to hide her bandaged shoulder from his gaze. A soft shh sounds as the silver-haired man's hand reaches out to touch the blonde Duchess. The silver-haired emperor shows deep concern for the blonde Duchess's injury, asking if she is in pain. Looking back at the silver-haired man, Eleanor insists she is fine and thanks him for his worry. The silver-haired man expresses regret for failing to take better care of her as the Duchess dismisses his apology. Lennox blames himself for the unwanted marriage and her current suffering, leaving the blonde woman visibly surprised. The silver-haired man invites her resentment while Eleanor silently questions how she could possibly dare to judge him. A soft shh sounds as the silver-haired man's hand moves toward the blonde Duchess's bandaged shoulder. Eleanor looks flustered as the silver-haired emperor gently touches her arm, his expression remaining solemn and soft. Feeling awkward, the blonde duchess suggests they sit down to continue their conversation in a more formal setting. The pair sits across from each other at a large wooden table, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. Eleanor admits her uncertainty about where to begin her explanation regarding the recent events with the Duke. The blonde woman declares that her issues with Duke Mechlin should not be the emperor's burden to bear. Eleanor acknowledges his role in arranging the marriage but asserts that their future remains her and the Duke's choice. The silver-haired man somberly admits that their attempts to make the marriage work have ultimately ended in failure. A gentle smile plays on Eleanor's lips as she thanks the silver-haired man for his heartfelt and sincere apology. A heavy dun sounds as the Duchess addresses the Emperor by his personal name, Renox, catching him off guard. Eleanor asks a pointed question, wondering if the silver-haired man already knew of their shared hidden history. Flashbacks reveal Eleanor's memory of a time when the silver-haired boy was much smaller than she was. The blonde Duchess's gaze softens as she recalls the early days of their childhood connection. Narrations explain that 12 years ago, young Prince Renox secretly escaped the palace to see the world. The flashback continues as young Eleanor rescues the prince after he was captured by a band of slave traders. In the past, a knight reports the success of the rescue mission to the young blonde princess. The young silver-haired boy stands before the young blonde girl in a grassy field after the dangerous encounter. Young Eleanor introduces herself as the Princess of Hartman and asks the silver-haired boy for his name. The silver-haired boy reveals he lacks a name, causing the young girl to look at him with confusion. The two children stand in the bright sunlight, a bond beginning to form between the princess and the nameless boy. With a bright smile, young Eleanor decides that the name Renox fits the silver-haired boy perfectly. The young boy looks at the blonde girl with wide emerald eyes, stunned by her kindness and the name. Back in the present, Renox looks away with a faint, nostalgic smile as Eleanor watches him intently. Eleanor realizes the silver-haired emperor has been watching over her for many years, far longer than she suspected. Renox apologizes for the deception, explaining he feared the truth about his identity might have caused her distress. A flashback shows the silver-haired boy hugging a royal woman, longing for Eleanor while forbidden from leaving the palace. Dark, ink-like clouds symbolize the fall of Eleanor's kingdom and the news of her danger reaching the emperor's ears. A firm squeeze sounds as the present-day Renox clenches his hand, his resolve appearing stronger than ever. Eleanor finally understands the emperor arranged her marriage specifically to repay his lifelong debt for her saving him. The silver-haired man admits he genuinely believed the marriage to the Duke would be the key to her happiness. Renox regrets his decision, acknowledging that the arranged marriage he initiated only brought the blonde duchess more pain. The silver-haired emperor vows to take full responsibility and offers his absolute help to rectify the situation. Eleanor remains speechless, her blue eyes wide as she processes the depth of the emperor's devotion to her. A sudden flinch sounds as Eleanor questions why the emperor truly cares so deeply about her personal welfare. The blonde duchess insists that her past rescue of him was mere luck and he owes her nothing more. A rhythmic thump sounds as Eleanor wonders why her heart is racing at the emperor's intense proximity. Fiddling with her hands, the duchess wonders if Renox desires an emotional connection beyond simple gratitude. The silver-haired man remains silent for a moment, the light catching his face as he prepares to speak. The atmosphere shifts as the emperor's expression becomes unreadable, heightening the tension between them. Renox gives a firm, direct refusal, catching the blonde duchess completely by surprise with his bluntness. A soft woo sounds as Eleanor exhales while the emperor asks her to accept his help without any burden. The silver-haired man states that her safety and happiness are the only things he truly wants from her. A sudden frantic shout about a fire erupts, breaking the quiet, intimate atmosphere of the room. A sharp chirp sound accompanies the shared shock on their faces as they both react to the emergency. Panicked cries of fire fill the air, signaling immediate danger as the scene shifts to the growing chaos. Chaos erupts in the town as a violent, loud flume sounds, and terrified people scream for help. Another flume sounds as Duke Mechlin surveys the raging inferno that has consumed the village from a stone balcony. A knight reacts with a sharp gasp as he suddenly spots the Duke standing near the heat of the fire. A knight urges the Duke to evacuate immediately, but the black-haired man refuses, choosing to stay until the fire is out. A rhythmic thump sounds as Emperor Renox arrives on the scene with his retinue to personally address the growing emergency. A soft shk sounds as Renox asks what caused the fire, but the Duke admits he has no answers yet. Surveying the damage from a high tower, the Emperor notes the dire situation, linking the fire to the Major's recent death. Renox suspects a deeper conspiracy, wondering if there is any lead on Umar's suspicious and sudden death. The Duke reveals that a mysterious Dr. K visited Umar before his suicide, prompting Renox to question the doctor's real name. After learning no one knows the doctor's real name, the Emperor orders an immediate investigation into the suspicious individual. Renox commands that the Duchess and Brianna return to the palace, prompting a respectful bow as the Duke obeys. The black-haired Duke is visibly rattled, internally fuming that the Emperor made such a significant decision without consulting him. A sharp clack sounds as a pair of hands nervously fiddle with dark spheres in a richly decorated room. Madame Carolyn stares ahead with a look of intense focus, her mind racing through the potential fallout of recent events. A repetitive clack sounds as Carolyn meets secretly with a bandaged hooded figure in a private lounge. Carolyn worries about the situation turning serious, but the hooded man insists he had no choice in his recent actions. The hooded figure reports the elimination of the remaining organization members while Carolyn contemplates the news with a thoughtful hum. Carolyn plots to frame the death as a suicide, claiming he died from guilt for kidnapping the blonde Duchess. The scene shifts with a final thought, suggesting the immediate crisis has been temporarily managed through calculated deception. Angrily, Carolyn blames Eleanor for the unraveling plans just before a sudden shout calls out her name. A sudden burst sounds as a man enters the room, catching Carolyn by surprise during her secret meeting. Count Verdict, a cousin of Mayor Weimar and founding member of the Merchant Union, appears frantic and out of breath. A soft shh sounds as Carolyn dismisses the hooded man, telling him he is free to leave their meeting. A silent knot passes between the hooded man and Count Verdict as the mysterious figure exits the room. Count Verdict laments the loss of his cousin, while Carolyn offers her false sympathies, calling it a terrible tragedy. The Count believes the burden was too heavy, unaware Carolyn is glad the secret about the flower was kept hidden. A sharp tisk sounds as Carolyn blames Eleanor for the arrests that forced Umar to take such drastic measures. Verdict blames himself for his lack of strictness, while Carolyn vows she won't stand by and do nothing. A dark heh sounds as Carolyn smirks, asking the Count for his help with her next move. The Empress Mother and a companion wait anxiously as the sun sets, wondering why they haven't heard any news. A soft shuck sounds as Eleanor enters the room, prompting the Empress Mother to address her with great relief. A quick click-clack sounds as the Empress Mother rushes across the room to greet the returning blonde Duchess. The Empress Mother snakes Eleanor's hands, expressing deep relief at her safety, while Eleanor thanks her for the warm welcome. The older woman asks about the kidnapping and if Mayor Umar was responsible, prompting Eleanor to question the official report. Eleanor asks for a special favor, and the Empress Mother immediately promises to grant her whatever she desires. A moment of tense silence hangs between the two women as Eleanor prepares to deliver her shocking request. A formal bow sounds as Eleanor humbly requests to be released from her prestigious role as lady-in-waiting. The Empress Mother and her companion are left speechless by the blonde Duchess's unexpected and bold resignation. Eleanor stands with a look of calm resolve, her blue eyes reflecting a newfound sense of personal freedom. Red-haired Brianna exhales a soft sigh of relief as she finally returns to the safety of the palace. Brianna is greeted by Countess Lorenz, who expresses her surprise and delight at seeing the red-haired woman again. The Countess asks if Brianna is okay after suffering because of the Duchess, but Brianna begins to correct her. Brianna tells the older woman there is something important she must know regarding the truth about the blonde Duchess. Looking serious, Brianna asks if they might speak in private to discuss the specific details concerning Eleanor. Back in the reception room, a sharp bow accompanies Eleanor's request, leaving the Empress Mother and her lady stunned. The Empress Mother asks if Eleanor intends to return to House Mechlin now that she is resigning. Eleanor explains she cannot remain by the Empress's side because she feels she has failed her royal duty. A formal bow sounds as Eleanor confesses that the recommendation documents she originally submitted were completely fake. The Empress Mother and her companion react with absolute shock to Eleanor's admission of document forgery. Eleanor reveals she imitated Carolyn's handwriting to write the recommendation herself without the woman's knowledge or consent. The Empress Mother reflects on Eleanor's admission, noting that she had sensed something was amiss for some time. Eleanor accepts full responsibility for the forgery while the Empress Mother calls out to her in a soft, contemplative tone. Expressing her sincere gratitude, the blonde Duchess admits that the Empress Mother is the only person in the Empire to hold her in high regard. The scene is framed by delicate flowers as Eleanor continues to speak about her future intentions. Standing with quiet resolve, Eleanor officially announces her firm intention to separate from the Duke and leave House Mechlin. A sudden, sharp stagger sounds as the Empress Mother nearly collapses from the shock of Eleanor's life-changing decision. The Empress Mother and her companion warn Eleanor that Carolyn will not easily let her go and that standing alone is a reckless path. Eleanor acknowledges the difficulty but insists on correcting her dishonest past, prompting the Empress Mother to grant her forgiveness. Shocked by the unexpected mercy, the blonde Duchess gasps as she looks at the woman she previously deceived. The Empress Mother kindly urges Eleanor not to give up, stating that her character is far too valuable to be discarded. A formal bow sounds as the Empress Mother reveals she initially suspected a motive, but now understands Eleanor's desperate situation. The atmosphere softens as the Empress Mother reflects on the curious and unique nature of Eleanor's soul. With a warm smile, the Empress Mother praises Eleanor's relentless spirit, leaving the blonde Duchess feeling deeply humbled. Eleanor reveals she already discussed her circumstances with the Emperor, catching the Empress Mother off guard with her proactive approach. The blonde Duchess explains that she was completely honest with Renix about her past and the failed state of her marriage. The Empress Mother officially releases Eleanor from her duties while the Duchess vows to never let Carolyn control her again. Expressing admiration for Eleanor's unwavering spirit, the Empress Mother asks what the Duchess plans to do next. A soft smile appears on Eleanor's face, signaling her newfound peace and readiness to face the challenges ahead. Exhausted from the recent events, Eleanor rests on a sofa until a sudden rhythmic knock sounds at her door. A soft creak sounds as the red-haired Brianna peeks into the room, calling out to Eleanor with a serious expression. Eleanor politely welcomes Brianna inside, offering her a seat to discuss the urgent matter that brought her there. A heavy silence fills the room as the two women sit opposite each other, preparing for a difficult conversation. Brianna reveals that Countess Lorenz informed her of Eleanor's deception, questioning how the Duchess truly obtained her palace position. A sharp gulp sounds as Eleanor listens to Brianna recount the claims of forgery and begs for the truth. Brianna is visibly shaken when Eleanor confirms the truth of the forgery, struggling to comprehend the Duchess's actions. A loud wail sounds as Brianna frantically urges Eleanor to beg the Empress Mother for a pardon and hide the evidence. Eleanor questions why Brianna wants to help her despite their history, prompting Brianna to admit she still hates her. Crying, Brianna insists that Eleanor must stay because she needs more time to properly defeat her irritating rival. A soft laugh sounds as Eleanor thanks Brianna for her concern, causing the red-haired woman to react with disbelief. Looking forward with determination, Eleanor prepares herself for the final legal steps in her plan for independence. Back at his desk, a soft shk sounds as Emperor Renox continues his work until an attendant arrives. An attendant presents an unusual petition, sparking the Emperor's curiosity as he asks for the specific details of the document. A startling notification reveals that Duchess Mechlin has officially filed a petition requesting permission for a divorce. Ranox is left speechless, his eyes wide as he stares at the official request that changes everything he planned. The scene shifts to the palace gardens, where the greenery reflects the changing tides of the political and personal landscape. The black-haired Duke Mechlin arrives after being summoned, greeting the Emperor with a formal inquiry about the meeting's purpose. Ranox inquires about the Duke's upcoming birthday celebration, noting that the man's mother was particularly insistent on the event. The Duke grants the Emperor permission to ask a question, maintaining a respectful but somewhat distant posture. A brief pause hangs in the air as Renox prepares to ask a deeply personal and hypothetical question. The Emperor wonders if the Duke would have accepted the marriage proposal if the bride had been someone other than Eleanor. Renox looks intently at the Duke, asking if he still would have accepted the royal favor regardless of the person. The Emperor states that his own choice would not have changed regardless of who it was, emphasizing his resolve. A soft exhale sounds as Renox apologizes for the forced union, but the Duke dismisses the need for an apology. The Duke claims that Eleanor is content with her marriage, urging the Emperor not to worry about her welfare. A visible tremble sounds as Renox clenches his fist, internally questioning if the Duke truly believes Eleanor is happy. The Duke dismisses the idea of unhappiness, citing the high status and wealth associated with the House of Mechlin. Looking cold and arrogant, the black-haired man insists that being a duchess of his house is more than enough for happiness. Renox questions the Duke's earnest belief in Eleanor's contentment, to which the man gives a firm and confident confirmation. Realizing the depth of the Duke's misunderstanding, the Emperor notes that the situation is far more serious than he imagined. A rhythmic thump sounds as someone walks through the palace, the sound echoing the growing tension between the two men. A sudden flaying sounds as Emperor Renox prepares for the meeting with an air of authority. The imperial court offers a grand blessing to the Emperor, echoing through the Golden Hall. A formal bow sounds as the red-haired Marquis of Liege pays his respects to the silver-haired sovereign. The Marquis of Matthias and the Marquis of Delft stand ready to attend the high-stakes imperial session. The red-haired Marquis of Liege maintains a posture of deep respect before the throne of his ruler. Emperor Renox reacts with silent surprise as the gravity of the upcoming discussion begins to settle. An official reports that the black-haired Duke Mechlin is absent, prompting a thoughtful response from the Emperor. The Marquis of Leto requests the Emperor's attention to address an urgent matter before the meeting begins. Asking for a royal favor, the Marquis of Leto seeks permission for Count Verdict to join the assembly. Emperor Renox grants the request, while the dark-haired Count Verdict offers his humble thanks to the monarch. Renox asks for the details, and the dark-haired Count Verdict claims an individual used fraud to enter the palace. Renox frowns as Count Verdict explains that a lady-in-waiting used forged documents to obtain her royal position. Count Verdict demands the immediate arrest of the blonde duchess for her alleged crime of falsifying official records. Apologizing for the delay, a brown-haired attendant dresses the black-haired Duke Mechlin, who dismisses the man's worries. A sudden rhythmic knock sounds at the door, prompting the Duke to question who has come to visit. A sharp ka-chunk sounds as the door opens, revealing a glimpse of the blonde duchess's elegant blue gown. Eleanor stands at the doorway, her blonde hair and blue eyes framed by a sense of quiet determination. The black-haired Duke Mechlin turns to face his wife, questioning her unexpected presence in his private quarters. Vincent von Nova bows respectfully as Eleanor introduces herself, establishing a formal tone for the tense encounter. A heavy silence follows as Vincent leaves the room, leaving the Duke and Eleanor to face each other alone. The title card introduces the graceful rebellion of the Duchess as she prepares for a life-altering confrontation. A soft shk sounds as Eleanor presents a small gift box, her expression serious as she approaches the Duke. The black-haired man is momentarily stunned by the blonde Duchess's gift, his expression shifting to one of confusion. A heavy ha sounds as the Duke sighs, clearly weighed down by the recent stresses of his position. A quick flip sounds as the Duke takes the gift, offering a curt thank you to the Duchess. Eleanor reveals she has one final gift to present, prompting the Duke to ask about the mysterious offering. With cold finality, Eleanor declares that the second gift she is providing him is their official divorce. A loud slam sounds as Eleanor places her hands firmly on the desk, punctuating her demand for freedom. A sharp rip sounds as the Duke mentally rejects the divorce, vowing that he will never allow it. The Duke argues their diplomatic union is unchangeable, but the blonde Duchess insists she is fully aware of it. Eleanor shocks the Duke by claiming that the separation was ordered by His Imperial Majesty the Emperor himself. The black-haired man is left completely speechless, his eyes widening in disbelief at the Duchess's sudden claim. Back at the palace, Emperor Renox examines a document with a look of deep concentration and quiet contemplation. A soft shuck sounds as Renox asks if the statement was written by Carolyn, receiving a firm confirmation. Count Verdict insists that the blonde Duchess must be arrested immediately if the claims in the statement are true. Marquis Delft worries about the Duke's reputation, but Count Verdict argues that the insult to the crown is greater. Count Verdict demands the Emperor issue a punishment, only for Renox to reveal that justice has already been served. The Emperor explains that Lady Brianna reported the blonde Duchess's deceitful application 2 days prior to this meeting. Renox looks on calmly, noting that the Duchess has already confessed her wrongdoings to the crown in private. Count Verdict is shocked as the Emperor explains that the law of double jeopardy prevents any further prosecution. A sudden stir fills the room just as a sharp rhythmic knock sounds at the door of the chamber. A sharp kachak sounds as the black-haired Duke Mechlin enters the room, apologizing for his late arrival. The Duke looks around the meeting room, sensing a shift in the atmosphere as all eyes turn toward him. A soft sh sounds as Renox hands the Duke a document, suggesting the man read its shocking contents. A moment of intense realization strikes the Duke as he looks at the paper handed to him by Renox. A loud dun sounds as the Duke reacts with absolute horror to the information contained within the document. A rhythmic thump sounds as the Duke storms through the palace, his hands clenched into fists of rage. With eyes burning with a dark intensity, the Duke vows that he must find Eleanor without any delay. A sudden fling sounds as the black-haired man throws open a door, his arrival signaling a coming storm. A startled maid gasps as the black-haired Duke Mechlin arrives, demanding to see his wife at once. The black-haired Duke demands Eleanor's whereabouts as the maid explains she left the palace. Trembling with fury, the black-haired Duke realizes Eleanor planned her exit to attend a party tonight. The black-haired Duke reacts with shock as he hears Eleanor's plan to attend the upcoming party. The scene shifts to the ducal estate of Mechlin, where the air is thick with tension. The brown-haired woman expresses outrage over the divorce demand, while her attendant confirms the Duke's letter. Fuming with anger, the brown-haired woman curses the insolent behavior of the blonde Duchess. A frantic call sounds as a maid urges the brown-haired mistress to come outside immediately. The brown-haired woman is taken aback as a sudden rhythmic temp sounds echoing through the hall. Her fury rises as a series of loud, heavy stomp sounds while she descends to confront Eleanor. Eleanor stands tall in a stunning red gown, her blonde hair catching the light as she arrives. Eleanor offers a polite greeting as a soft, quick chick sounds, maintaining her composure before the mistress. Eleanor calmly reminds the outraged brown-haired woman that she is still legally the Duchess of Mechlin. The brown-haired woman threatens a harsh lesson, only for Eleanor to mention a name from the past. The brown-haired woman recoils as a sharp, sudden flinch sounds, reacting to the rumors Eleanor mentioned. A series of rhythmic, nervous trembles sounds as the woman demands to know Eleanor's source of information. Looking determined, Eleanor vows to find the truth about the brown-haired woman's real character. The brown-haired woman orders her butler to seize Eleanor, who questions the sudden command in confusion. The brown-haired mistress orders the immediate capture of the blonde Duchess, demanding her total submission. The air is cut as a sudden sharp whoosh sounds, with the brown-haired woman brandishing her whip. A soft purple gradient fills the screen, marking a tense transition in the heated confrontation. The room fills with unease as a chorus of rhythmic chatter sounds from the observing household staff. Ignoring the onlookers, the brown-haired woman demands Eleanor be brought before her immediately. Eleanor cries out as a sharp, painful clasp sounds, with the staff forcing her to her knees. A cold, piercing glare sounds as Eleanor stares back at her tormentor with unshakable defiance. The brown-haired woman threatens Eleanor with a grim fate similar to someone from her past. The confrontation escalates until a sudden, sharp whish sounds, interrupting the brown-haired woman's violent intent. The mistress gaspes in surprise as a quick, decisive flick sounds, signaling the arrival of the Duke. The black-haired Duke looks on with cold intensity, demanding an explanation for the chaotic scene. The staff pleads for mercy as a series of loud, heavy thumps sounds from the Duke's approach. The black-haired Duke stares down the man who held Eleanor, leaving the servants speechless and terrified. The brown-haired woman's confidence breaks as a sharp, sudden flinch sounds under her son's freezing gaze. The tension breaks slightly as a heavy, weary ha sounds, with the Duke reaching for Eleanor. Eleanor rejects his assistance as a sharp, resounding slap sounds, pushing his hand away with disdain. Standing firm, Eleanor declares that this treatment is the exact reason she is demanding a divorce. The black-haired Duke is left stunned as Eleanor calls for an immediate end to their marriage. A sudden announcement reveals a guest's arrival, startling both Eleanor and the black-haired Duke. The purple-haired Elgar is perplexed as a soft, rhythmic scratch sounds, questioning the status of the celebration. The black-haired Duke's rage boils as a sharp, tight clench sounds, feeling humiliated before the official guest. The evening is punctuated by a series of rhythmic clips and clop sounds as the carriage departs. Elgar reassures Eleanor about the Emperor's character as a small, light giggle sounds during their journey. Eleanor questions Elgar's casual description of the Emperor, while Elgar warns her about the risks of treason. The silver-haired Emperor Renox arrives at the palace looking toward the returning group with interest. The Emperor makes his entrance as a series of soft, rhythmic TMPS sounds from his steady stride. Renox teases his secretary as a heavy, amused ha sounds, lightening the mood of their arrival. The purple-haired Elgar formally introduces the blonde Duchess and asks the Emperor to provide her aid. Eleanor tries to decline the royal favor, but the silver-haired Renox insists she take his hand. The scene shifts to the Western Palace, specifically to the room belonging to young Hal. The silver-haired boy is overjoyed as a soft, cheerful giggle sounds welcoming Eleanor back with affection. Renox watches the reunion and invites Eleanor to stay at the palace for a longer duration. The silver-haired Emperor smiles warmly, offering Eleanor a residence until her new home is ready. Eleanor agrees to stay at the palace, acknowledging that she will trouble the Emperor until her residence is prepared. Renox expresses that his own happiness is linked directly to the blonde Duchess's well-being and current peace of mind. Eleanor stares after the silver-haired man, deeply moved by the unexpected kindness and care he has shown her. A soft shh sounds as Renox departs, while Eleanor recalls a future military conflict involving the Bahamas Kingdom. Realizing the looming danger, Eleanor calls out to the silver-haired Emperor before he can leave the palace room. Renox encourages the blonde Duchess to speak her mind freely about whatever is currently weighing on her heart. A quick shirk sounds as Eleanor warns the Emperor to remain wary of the rapid growth of the Bahamas Kingdom. Eleanor explains how the neighboring nation has been secretly growing its economic and technological strength through bold new investments. She cautions that their newfound power will inevitably lead them to challenge the Empire's established borders in the east. Fearing she overstepped her bounds, the blonde Duchess immediately asks for forgiveness if her warning caused him any discomfort. Renox reassures her that her advice is invaluable and expresses deep gratitude for her insightful and timely warning. Back at the estate, the black-haired Duke Ernst Mechlin discovers his mother holding a heavy, coiled leather whip. A sharp flink sounds as Ernst demands to know why his mother is brandishing such a violent weapon in the hall. A soft frown sounds as the Duke expresses his utter disgust at his mother's decision to lash his wife. Ernst is outraged that the household staff were allowed to humiliate the Duchess by forcing her to her knees. The Duke orders the immediate termination and physical punishment of every servant involved in the cruel and rebellious incident. Taking full command of the household, Ernst declares that all future reports must go directly to him rather than his mother. A quick sounds as the Duke confines his mother to a month of strict self-reflection following her actions. Shortly after, the black-haired man reports to the silver-haired Emperor Renox after being summoned to discuss imperial affairs. Renox apologizes for the abrupt summons, noting that a serious matter has developed regarding the Empire's distant borders. Duke Ernst remains professional and composed, assuring the Emperor that he is ready to serve whenever he is called. A quick tap sounds as Renox indicates a specific region on the map that requires immediate military attention. A soft shook sounds as the Emperor explains that a violent conflict has erupted at a contested borderland. Renox describes how soldiers from the Bahamas Kingdom crossed over, leading to a bloody skirmish and multiple grave injuries. Despite their claims of accidental trespass, Renox insists on a full investigation to uncover the actual truth of the clash. The black-haired Duke agrees that the situation is far too suspicious to ignore and supports the need for clarity. A sudden flinch sounds as Ernst realizes the Emperor's plan is to send him personally to investigate the border. Ernst accepts the duty, prioritizing his responsibility to the crown over the ongoing personal drama at his family estate. The Duke thinks about his mother, hoping that his instructions to the staff will keep Eleanor safe during his absence. Ernst convinces himself that his mother is now powerless to inflict any more harm upon his wife while he is away. A soft rustle sounds as young Hal explores the palace library while Eleanor searches through the tall bookshelves. A light fumble sounds as the silver-haired boy points out that a particular book feels very strange to his touch. Eleanor takes the leather-bound volume, explaining that its unique texture is simply due to its expensive and rare cover. Young Hal is revealed to be the blind son of Emperor Renox and the late Empress Idia. The heavy responsibility of caring for the sightless prince falls primarily on his stern, aging household nanny. A soft flap sounds as Eleanor opens a book about oleander ecology and notices a hidden object tucked inside. A sharp shriek sounds as a small, old photograph slips out from between the pages and onto the floor. Eleanor picks up the picture, which depicts a man and a woman standing together in a sunlit garden. The blonde Duchess is startled by a voice calling her name, causing her to react with a sudden jolt. A quick shk sounds as Eleanor hastily hides the photograph back inside the book to avoid any unwanted detection. The brown-haired nanny approaches, questioning why the Duchess and the young prince have wandered away from their usual spot. Eleanor offers a polite apology, claiming she only wanted to spend a few moments reading with the young prince. The nanny stares at Eleanor with a cold, unblinking intensity that makes the atmosphere in the library feel heavy. She insists on taking the prince away immediately so that the Duchess can continue her reading without any more interruptions. A soft click sounds as the nanny walks toward the young boy to lead him out of the room. A sudden flinch sounds as the silver-haired Hal reacts with visible fear to the nanny's presence near him. A soft shk sounds as the nanny lifts the boy, whose aversion to her seems incredibly unnatural and forced. Eleanor notes the nanny's freezing demeanor and begins to suspect that something is very wrong with the woman's character. A quick whick sounds as the nanny carries the prince away, leaving the blonde Duchess alone with her thoughts. Sensing a hidden danger to the boy, the blonde Duchess decided to follow them to ensure Hal's continued safety. The blonde Duchess stares in silence as the brown-haired nanny holds the young prince. A sharp click and clack sound as the nanny obeys Eleanor's request and departs. The leather-bound book and the mysterious old photograph rest atop the smooth marble table. Eleanor learns the book's author hailed from Ellenburg, a maritime city famous for its scholarship. Clutching the botanical volume, Eleanor feels a growing sense of unease about her discovery. The blonde Duchess reads that Viscount Zaratha, the book's author, died at a young age. Eleanor examines the photograph, certain of the man's identity but curious about the woman. Eleanor realizes with shock that the woman in the garden is the late Empress Eladia. The blonde Duchess ponders the secret relationship between the late Empress and the deceased Viscount. A quick whip sounds as Eleanor discovers a tender message addressed to someone named Lily. Eleanor remains puzzled by the name Lily and its connection to the people in the photograph. A rhythmic knock-knock sound signaling someone is looking for the Duchess at the door. A soft schwook sounds as Eleanor nervously invites the visitor in while hiding the evidence. With a quick tick sound, Eleanor firmly slams the book shut to conceal the photograph. A soft creak sounds as the nanny returns with refreshments, apologizing for interrupting her reading. Eleanor accepts the cookies and asks the brown-haired nanny to stay for a brief conversation.